my seat. My feet are on the floor.
Good evening. This public meeting of the Palo Alto Unified School District Board of Education is called to order. The board met at 4:30 this afternoon for a closed session and took no reportable action. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda order.
So moved.
Student board members, preferential vote on the agenda order.
Do we have a second?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Is there a second?
Somebody want a second?
I'll second. Yeah, okay. Seconded by Mr. Collins. Student board members, preferential vote.
Aye.
Aye. Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The agenda order is approved. The first item on the agenda is, actually, we have the consent calendar. Oh. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. These are items that are approved all in one action without discussion unless any member of the board or community wants to comment on any of these items, at which point we'll pull them and put them on the agenda for action. Are there any comments or board members wish to comment on any of these consent items?
Can we pull item D, please?
Item D?
Yes, please. Purchase orders.
Purchase orders. Anything else on the?
Hang on, I got an email about one. Is that, hang on, I just want, no, it's on.
You're talking about 35.
I was like 3551 versus
Yeah,
3550.
yeah.
Just want to make sure. Okay.
Okay, so is there anyone else? Does anyone in the audience think that they want to comment and have submitted a card? No? Okay. So is there a motion then to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item D?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in, preferential vote, student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent calendar is approved with the exception of item D, which will be moved to the action items. We'll consider it after item 5A under action items. Next item on the agenda is open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for for community members to address the board on a topic that is not agendized for discussion this evening. And you can do that by submitting a card where it says speaker cards over there next to Vicky. And then I will call you and you can address the board. Do we have any? We have 10 cards?
So does that change your?
I don't, well, does it? I don't know. Let's see. I'm looking for the rules. We have 10 cards for open forum, and the question is, no, that does not change our time limit per card.
I don't know if they're going to be open for me.
Somebody want to put in another card?
Sounds like they might. If there's, is there anyone else who's going to submit a card for open forum? Okay, so we will have 11 cards, so that means under the rules that we will have 2 minutes per speaker. And so I'll call you in groups of 3 so that you know when you can speak, and then you can get ready to approach the podium. So the first 3 are Brian Yang, Lawrence Chang, and Jennifer Zhu. Mr. Yang, Brian Yang.
So, hi, I'm Brian Yang. I'm a senior at Pali this year, and I'm one of the team captains of the Pali Robotics team, Team 8. So, I speak on behalf of 22 members of the team that have signed a general statement letter. So, since the arrival of our new head coach following the departure of Mr. Kuzmal, the team has fallen into somewhat of a downward spiral. We support that some changes need to be made this year, specifically regarding safety and supervision. However, over the past couple of months, the new head coach has enforced a number of rules before taking the time to understand the nature and goals of the robotics team. Students, mentors, and parents have tried to improve communication with her, but these attempts at discussion are ignored or taken as personal attacks. She approaches the team with hostility and takes actions to the detriment of the students. We have felt intimidation, fear, and discomfort from being around the head coach, and we feel this has not been addressed or even acknowledged by the administration. We feel that we have been subjected to mistreatment by the head coach on numerous occasions. We can name many more negative experiences with her than positive ones, and even when her actions are not directed at us, we all hear the upsetting stories of how she made other team members cry or even swore at them. Coming to the robotics lab is now surrounded by a sense of anxiety. We always worry whether a new rule will pop up or someone will be threatened and punished in an arbitrary manner. We care about one another, and we especially care for the robotics program as a whole. We do not believe she is a suitable fit as our head coach. We do not feel heard. Robotics members, boosters, mentors, and parents have repeatedly gone to the PALI administrators voicing their concerns, but even with assurances of change, little has been done. The PALI robotics community is upset by the way the new head coach treats students and what it has done to our mental and emotional health. We do not feel it is appropriate for a coach and a professional educator to mistreat students as such and for that to be excusable by the administration. We feel intimidated, scared, and bullied by the new head coach, and the lack of action taken for our emotional and mental safety and well-being is appalling.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Yang. Lawrence Chang, Jennifer Zhu, and Mary Lee Suhu. Did you want to mention people can what? Email. Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Collins. You can come up. If you don't have a chance to finish your remarks, or if you just want to send something additional or what you said, then you can send it to board@pausd.org, and we will get a chance to read it that way as well. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that would be perfect, because I was under the impression it was 3 minutes. Okay, so,
Actually, Lawrence Chang is next.
Lawrence hasn't shown up yet.
Okay, so
should I just go?
So you're Jennifer.
Yeah.
I'll put him aside, or I'll put him at the end, and if he comes, then he can speak then. So this is Jennifer Zhu.
Okay. So, hey guys, my name is Jennifer XU, and I'm the PALI Robotics' other co-captain alongside Brian Yang. So I didn't think I would ever have to be doing this in front of Ed Board and speaking up about an issue like this, but it certainly wasn't my first action, which I really want you guys to be aware of. So I started pretty small, like the rest of our team, having talks with my head coach, trying to work things out to make the team a better place. Because communication really is the key here, and there's nothing good communication can't solve, but that just wasn't there. Like, I watched her lash out at my fellow co-captain, threatening to call security on him. She also threatened to remove him from the team 3 times now. And when I realized our relationship with her might be irreparable, I began looking towards external help through the PALI administration, which is why, as Brian mentioned, things have been escalating more. So that too proved a little bit more frustrating. So I've met with Mr. Paulson, Dr. Keating, Mr. Bergson, my grade level counselor, PALI Wellness, you name it, I've tried to meet with them to talk about this issue because I really, really care about PALI robotics, but things just weren't working out. It felt as if every single time I went in, I was starting at square one. And eventually, I had enough of it. I wanted the issue to be resolved, so I filed a UCP, Uniform Complaints Procedure, report, thinking that someone would finally care about the issue and give it attention. But nothing has been done, and last Friday, when a group of parents were meeting with Mr. Paulson and Dr. Keating, they were told that they did not hear about student concerns at all, which made me really sad because my UCP report, all the times I've met with them, the class periods I've missed, and the time I spent outside of school trying to deal with this issue has really been building up for me. And it kind of hurt that people weren't dealing with the repercussions and claimed that my voice wasn't being heard. So we had scheduled a meeting after school today to deal with that and have several team members to share their experiences. And we asked for parents to accompany us because we know that certain students don't feel comfortable being alone with an administrator. It's an intimidating experience for a high schooler, especially if you're an underclassman. We wanted parents to be there to be silent but listening, but that was refused and the meeting was canceled, which is why I ended up here. I don't want to be at this meeting to be rude or disrespectful. I just love PALI robotics and because the community has been giving back to me, and I really want something to be done to help the wellness of our members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Lee Suhu, Stephanie Jackson, and then I'm going to get this wrong. So Sohiri Ashoke, maybe.
Hi, I'm Marilee Suhu. The Palo Alto High School robotics team, Team 8, does not simply build a robot each year. It develops character, leadership, friendship, and it empowers our students in ways that happen with their time together and trust from their coach and their leaders. The students of the Pali High School robotics team have been suffering, and their requests to be heard by administration are not being honored. The students had confirmed meeting with Mr. Paulson and Dr. Keating this afternoon. They promised to listen to them. Their pleas for help were met with the last-minute cancellation of this meeting, citing that the students' own parents weren't welcome as silent observers. Many students who are in classes with the robotics coach, regular academic classes, are very concerned about coming forward to speak about the harassment and intimidation by the head coach of robotics, as their academic record is of paramount importance to them, and they don't want it jeopardized through recrimination by telling you the full extent of their concerns and problems. So the 22 students who Brian mentioned who've officially signed a letter, well, there are many more who actually would like to be heard as well and have been able to sign this declaration. The robotics coach has made decisions, changes, and edicts without discussing these, asking for input, or understanding the group that she's leading. She makes the students uncomfortable getting in their personal space and calling some honey. This could be seen or received as a friendly gesture if she had built up any rapport with the team members. Overall, there's a sentiment that much of the beautiful and powerful learning opportunities, culture, and student-led direction of Team 8 have the potential to be decimated. You need to know that the students do not feel emotionally safe at the robotics lab this year. So the question now is student wellness and emotional health a true focus of the Palo Alto Unified School District?
Thank you. Stephanie Jackson, Sohidi Ashoke, and Alex Scharf.
Hello, yeah, so my name is Stephanie Jackson. I'm a senior at Gunn, and today I want to talk about the middle schools. So last year, before my twin and my 2 little sisters were heading out the door to go to school, one of my sisters, Katie, had a meltdown. She was freaking out because she was worried that the shirt that she was wearing was against the dress code at Fletcher. We were 20 minutes late to school that day to drop her off. That's 20 minutes that Katie could have spent in a classroom learning about valuable educational skills rather than learning how to shame herself for the shirt that she was wearing. When I was Katie's age, at the same school, I went to school wearing a pair of shorts, and as I was going into one of the classrooms, a teacher from behind me grabbed the hemline of my shorts and yanked my shorts down, so much that I remember being worried that they were going to fall completely off me. When I was told to change into my PE shorts, I started crying in the girls' bathroom because the teacher who had pulled my shorts down was one of my favorite teachers. And I had felt that I had disappointed them by wearing the shorts to school. I was 12 years old, too young to fully understand and fully comprehend how that one experience was going to affect me for the rest of my life. I was too young to understand that I shouldn't have been disappointed in myself. I should have been disappointed in the school and the school district that was charged with helping me learn, with making me feel safe, but had failed to do so. The dress code at PAUSD middle schools must change. In a region like Silicon Valley, where we seem to be years upon years ahead in educational achievements and technological advancements, our dress code policies seem to be decades in the past.
Thank you.
We need to change these laws, and we need to make them the same as what already exists at Gunn High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. And feel free, as everyone else, to email your comments to us at board@pausd.org. Sohidi Ashoke, Alex Scharf, and Min Chu.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Sohini Ashok, and I'll also be speaking about the dress code issue at middle schools in Palo Alto. So dress codes at Palo Alto middle schools often have enforcements regarding the length of shorts, whether undergarments are showing, or how wide the straps are. And according to the JLS handbook, these rules are in place for allowing participation in the learning environment and for preventing distraction. However, the implementation and enforcement of both of these things infringes on both of these rules. Forcing a student to take time out of their day to cover up and not distract other students is inherently, to be quite frank, a very awful message to send to young girls and boys in our community. And these dress codes are often enforced targeting female students. It's a very, very sexist policy, and in my opinion, it needs to be terminated. The message that you need to alter how you personally want to express yourself in order to not be sexualized by peers, teachers, and other community members is an example of victim blaming, and it's a sexist message that stems from the overarching theme of rape culture. No student in our community should feel that they have to look a certain way in order to be respected and viewed as acceptable in a school. Also, to bring in a fact, there is no statistical evidence at all correlating the amount of skin showing or dress codes to how students focus in a classroom environment. It's an outdated policy that has absolutely no real effect other than shaming students and making them feel embarrassed about their own bodies. Now I'd like to share a personal story about a friend of mine at JLS Middle School. So a couple months back, a friend of mine was sexually harassed at JLS Middle School by boys in her class who were taunting her because of the length of her shorts. And she called me crying, telling me that what happened, and I told her, okay, I'm really sorry what happened. I think you need to tell administrators. And she actually chose not to because her shorts were not under dress code. So this girl didn't speak up on behalf of being sexually harassed because of this policy. So I really hope you all consider what my friend and I are saying and consider reforming these codes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ofek, would you mind following up with this student on that point that she'd raised? Thank you. Alex Scharf, Minshu, and Steve Chesson.
On October 3rd, the Palo Alto Weekly reported that the district has decided to create a director of dispute resolution in the special education department, which is already approved and posted. I would like to thank Elena for writing about this, otherwise this would not have been brought to the attention of the community. This person will serve as a mediator between families and the school and is tasked with writing settlement agreements and other legal documents, developing due process procedures, and coordinating all required responses to any special education litigation, including resolution meetings, mediations, witness preparation, and general communication with attorneys, as well as providing advice and giving presentations on legal compliance, conflict resolution, and strategies for improving relationship with parents. This seems like a legal position, not a special ed position. Why is this function not covered as a part of the general counsel position, which was just approved and reports to the board, not the district? Why is another legally oriented position needed rather than staffing positions to support the students directly? And how can this person be neutral mediator when they report to the school district? A fair mediator does not also prepare district witnesses in litigation against students and their family, which is a part of the job description. And then a last issue I'd like to talk about, which is separate, is that I learned from a family recently at Ohlone they're losing their OT, Erin Finley, and they are sending her to another school. The special ed teacher, Hannah, is down one aide and about to lose another who is going on maternity leave. This leaves a gap at Ohlone. And my question is, why are we sending away a staff from a school that needs the staff to a different school? This just seems like deciding which students you're going to put in need instead of looking to hire another staff at the other school. Thank you.
Thank you. Minshu, Steve Chesson, and Leonard Ely.
Good evening, the board. My name is Minshu, and I'm currently come here to talk about polyrobotics as well. I want to let you know that I've been involved with polyrobotics for the last 3 years, and just this summer, our team was doing a summer camp for the middle school students, and there was a reporter coming from a national renowned a magazine called the PC magazine, and he didn't plan on reporting on the team, but he just stumbled on the team, and he was so impressed that he wrote a piece of article on the magazine about how vivid and how lively, how good the team is doing in terms of impacting the community and teaching the kids themselves. But since the new coach showed up, especially the last two months or so, it has taken a dramatic downturn. And our students are being intimidated and sometimes are being called with very mean names, and that's really affecting their mental health and well-being. I'm pleading to you guys to do something to move this forward, to address this as soon as possible so that our students are not damaged in some very bad way. Thank you.
Steve Chesson, Leonard Ely, and Lawrence Chang.
Good evening. I'm Steve Chesson, President of Californians for Electoral Reform. I am curious to know if you had any questions or feedback for me from the email that I sent you last week concerning your CVRA issue. In particular, I was curious to know the exact nature of the time extension that Mr. Temescu has given you. I don't know if you can answer that or not.
Yeah, I don't believe we're going to respond to you right
Okay.
now, Mr. Chesson, although board members can email you individually. But if you have further comments,
I do.
go ahead.
I do. And because another hat that I wear is as a member of the Santa Clara County Citizens Advisory Commission on Elections. We had our regular monthly meeting last Tuesday, October 2nd, and I informed the Registrar of Voters of the CVRA letter that you had received. She suggested that I let you know that you should contact her office about the new voting equipment that the county is planning to acquire, as it is expected to accommodate the alternative voting methods that I mentioned in my email to you. And should you do go to trustee areas, she will need to know those lines at least 125 days before your November 2020 election. Thank you.
Thank you. Leonard Ely and Lawrence Chang.
I am back. I have been with the robotics team for 3 years. I'm the treasurer of the boosters. And when I came back from a vacation a few weeks ago, on the way home from the airport, I heard that of the disarray that our team was in due to the coach. I think one of the big keys here is that people don't really understand what we're dealing with. The word team is a misnomer in this use. It's a student-led club, for all intents and purposes, and not a team. And one of the problems with our current coach is that she puts in the play and nobody understands it because they're not used to having a coach send in the play. Each different group within the organization sends in the plays. The build group, the business group, and the leadership. She is a facilitator, and it just is not working the way it is. We have tried to follow the procedures and the policies in going through the proper channels, and we've been rebuffed at almost every one. The administration has changed. We made an appointment, then they said, well, I'm sorry, but you can only have 2 people. Then they've changed appointments, and they don't want to talk about the issues with the teacher. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody was talking to me. And it really has come to the point where today we wanted to meet with the students, with Adam and Dr. Keating, and he decided that parents were not allowed, even the parents of students that were in the meeting. The reason that this is because we've had so many changes, and what we hear in one meeting is not the same thing we hear in other meetings. And it's really become very hard to tell what's going on. You got the students, you got the administration, and you have the teacher. And it really is a problem. I think one of the other problems is that the people that we're dealing with are new to our system and how we work in Palo Alto.
Thank you, Mr. Daly.
Okay.
Lawrence Chang, is Mr. Chang here? And we have one more, Grease Ida for open forum. Oh, yeah.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Griselda Morales. A ver si puedo yo explicarles algo. Y quisiera, no vengo a hablar de mí.
I don't want to talk about myself.
When you translate, why don't you stop?
No.
She can have twice as much
Usted
time.
habla y yo uso el
You get
micrófono.
twice as much time.
Okay, sí. Usted habla y yo.
No vengo a hablar de mí.
I did not come to speak about myself. Déjala así.
Vengo a hablar sobre todos mis estudiantes.
I want to talk about all of my other students.
Van a estar preguntándome el por qué.
They're going to ask me as to why.
Hay muchos estudiantes que no están recibiendo que no les han dado clases, están en sus casas sin recibir sus clases.
There are many students that are at home, they're not receiving their material.
Uno de ustedes
One of you
van a proteger a uno de mis estudiantes.
are going to protect one of my students.
Él podría venir a hablar ahorita con ustedes,
He would be able to come here and speak with one of you.
pero tiene mucho miedo de que todos los maestros se le volteen
He's very
y no les den
fearful.
sus clases.
He's very fearful that all the teachers would turn towards him and don't give him his classes.
Para que me entiendan más, les voy a decir tantito.
To share a little bit as to what I'm talking about.
Este estudiante era de clases
This student,
avanzadas.
he was an advanced student.
Este año me lo pusieron en clases regulares.
This year he was placed in regular class.
Me gustaría, cuando me ve a mí, ver su carita que me dice, ayúdame.
And if you can see my face when I look at him and he asks me for help.
Él dice, me enfado de las clases que me están dando. Sí estoy recibiendo calificaciones altas, pero no me está ayudando nada.
He tells me, yes, I'm upset with all the classes that I'm getting good grades, but it's not helping me.
Le dije, mi hijo, ve a hablar con tu maestro y dile lo que está pasando.
And I tell the student, go ahead and talk to the teacher and tell him what's going on.
Lo que le contestó el maestro,
What the teacher answered back,
para el otro año te vamos a poner en tus clases que tú quieres.
when next year we're going to put you in the classes that you want to be in.
Pero para mí es para atrasarlo. Va a llegar, van todos avanzados, pero él va a llegar, va a estar atrasado porque está perdiendo sus clases.
But for me, that's actually going to delay him. Everybody else is going to move forward and he's going to be behind.
A lo mejor ya estoy hablando mucho.
I think I'm talking too much now,
Yo quisiera que me escuchara todo el mundo
but I would like for everyone to hear me,
y que nos den nuestra igualdad y nuestro espacio.
that we get equality and our space.
Y también les pido que no estén educando a mis estudiantes para ir a una cárcel.
And I would like for my students not to be educated as to not going to prison or to jail.
Yo quiero que me los eduquen para ir a una universidad.
I want him to be educated to go to a university.
Y gracias por escucharme.
And thank you for hearing me.
Una pregunta, yo hice una pregunta, ¿alguien me va a responder?
I made a question. I had asked a question. Is anyone going to answer me?
Dr. Austin, could you arrange for a staff member to follow up with this community member, please?
Absolutely.
You'll be contacted this week by one of our staff members.
Y alguien le va a comunicarse con usted esta semana.
Ok, gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Lawrence Chang here at this point? Okay, so we're going to pass on this card. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Chang, can you come up and you'll have 2 minutes?
I'm class of 2020 at Pali, and I've been on the robotics team since my freshman year for the past 2 years. So I'd like to address the concerns I have to the new head coach that's been put in place. So she has, I guess, exhibited some really concerning behavior that has definitely affected my well-being, ability to concentrate in school and function as a robotics team member. I'm sure many other students can testify to this as well, but I'll bring up a specific case that happened on September 22nd. So essentially, Miss Creer brought me to like another side of the room and then just started breaking down in front of me. So there's a lot of emotionally charged speech. She was in tears and then kind of telling me how hard her life was as like coming to this new city, being the new head coach and so forth. And then doing a lot of direct insults towards me and then the team in general about how we're giving her such a hard time and making it really hard for her to be a head coach. And then, but then this took me by complete shock because up until that point, I guess I felt like I had been reasonable in trying to just have a productive interaction with her. And then essentially that escalated to her, essentially calling, like using a couple swear words, not directly at me, but then just in her speech again, and then insulting me a couple things I would rather not say here. And then after that proceeding, I would carry on to do my work at robotics, and then later a student's parents would arrive, and then she would essentially do the same emotional breakdown she did in front of me.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but you're out of time, but if you want to email your comments to board@pausd.org, then we can have them in full. Thank you.
Sounds good, thank you.
And I think that concludes open forum. I believe the superintendent will have a comment on Pali Robotics in his superintendent's report. And that is actually the next item on our agenda. Superintendent's report, Dr. Austin.
All right, thank you. I'm going to end my comments with a statement about robotics. Going back through my notes, first of all, I want to thank everyone who was involved with our Professional Development Day. That involves a lot of people, some of which the average person wouldn't know the names of the people that worked so hard to make sure that this was such a successful day. And I've seen some of the early evaluations that came back from our participants, and anything that's over 90% positive, which our results are, is unheard of. Like we talked about, if we would have bought everyone in the room dinner tonight, we wouldn't have had a 90% approval rating. So just really, really extraordinary, and to see some of the high quality program that was put on between the different divisions was just, it's something we should be very proud of here. Next, I'm going to brag about 2 board members. They're the 2 on my left tonight. But I'm sorry, everyone was all excited. They're like, is it me? Is tonight my night? Yeah, no, these 2 over here. I meet with our student board reps before every meeting, and usually just to ask if they have any questions about anything, if there's anything that they have particular interest in. And every single time, I'm impressed with the preparation that they do before our meetings. They open up the packets and they have very specific questions, sometimes about very detailed pieces. They read between the lines, they find the nuances, they advocate for their schools, they ask great questions. And in my role now, I don't get to interact with students like I did as a teacher or principal, and I'm very thankful for these 2. And if they are an indication of our school district, we are in great shape. So I want to thank both of you for all you put into this. I really appreciate it. And you always stay till the end. That is not common. Yeah, well, if it does, I'll walk them out. Okay, one thing I've been able to do here recently is quite a few living room meetings. And these meetings have been to discuss the bond with community members, but they've gone so much beyond that. It's my opportunity in these settings to hear thoughts from community members in small settings. And it's something that when the election comes and goes, I'd like to find a way to continue, because there's just so much value in small group discussions after hours. I'd like to thank the host of those, and I'd be willing to entertain thoughts moving forward about how we can do those, either around specific topics or more general in nature. But they've been a good thing. To our two speakers tonight on the dress code, while I was sitting here, first of all, we're going to need to do some research on that. When I mean we, I mean I. Being new to the district, there's some things I just don't know about with our dress code.
Can I say that I also was not aware?
Okay, yeah, so this is worthy of a little research and a summary back to the board on maybe some thoughts. But what I do know is that I have two daughters, and my two daughters could have stood at that same podium and said exactly the same words about their thoughts, and I know that because we have had those conversations. So I just want you to know, for our two speakers, that you're not alone. There are two young women with the last name Austin who have very similar thoughts. Almost done with that part. Okay, robotics. Couple things. And first of all, when you're commenting from my seat at the end, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to make everyone happy, so I'm just going to concede that right now. But I do understand robotics programs. I do have history with robotics programs. I've traveled to Las Vegas for tournaments to follow the team. My last district, I've been backstage. I've been to some of the preparation pieces of it. So I do have an understanding at least of the concept of robotics. And first and foremost, those students learn to problem solve. That's what you do. My favorite part of competitions is what happens between a round and the next round. I mean, I've seen them pretty much tear things apart and start over. It's the most impressive, amazing piece of the whole thing. And the processes and the way the teams are divided up into functions is really a way all high-functioning organizations should work. I don't personally know the new coach, and even if I did, I would not comment on that in this setting. It's just inappropriate for me to do so. But I do know what it's like to be new, and just something for everyone just to keep in the back of your mind. And this is not a rationalization. It's not a defense. It's none of those things. It's just a thought that when you're new, like I am too right now, you come from a place where you were successful or you would not be employed here. You've had some success at some point in time. Some things that you were successful in and that you know apply perfectly to your new setting. Some things do not. And I can tell you, as a new person coming in with experience, there are some things that apply here as much as anywhere else, and some things that I have to completely relearn in my position and to calibrate differently. It's just something to just keep in mind, because we're all going to be new somewhere at some point in time. The last thought on robotics is, while I've been following this topic, I wouldn't pretend to know every nuance of what's happening there, but what I do know are high schools and students, and I have faith in both. I know students are problem solvers, and at the end of the day, kids make sense, and they will figure out a way to work through issues if given some space. I also know Mr. Paulson and Dr. Keating. I know what they're trying to accomplish working with the team, and I also know no response ever seems fast enough in the moment, regardless of the topic. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of space. We're going to follow up on every single thing that was brought forward, not only here, but previously. And my faith is in students as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. The next item on our agenda is student board member reports, beginning with Mr. Prabhakar.
Yeah.
No.
So tomorrow, Gun is a special schedule. So the freshmen and sophomores have self in their cohorts. The juniors take the PSAT tests and their college workshops for seniors. On Friday, we have the blood donation drive. So Gun students will be able to donate blood and get a pint of ice cream in return. Yeah.
Sugar spike.
And then we also have events hosted by gun clubs over the next 2 weekends. So on the 14th, Gun Speech and Debate is hosting a tournament, and then the 20th, Gun Model United Nations is hosting a conference. Both these events have over 350 kids from around the Bay Area coming to Gun, and they require a lot of preparation. So our clubs are doing a lot of work to make sure these events run smoothly. And then SEC, our student government, is preparing for homecoming, which is the week of the 22nd. So we're going to have things like floats, the homecoming dance, the homecoming football game, and events during every brunch and lunch during that week, including a basketball shooting competition, sumo wrestling, balloon stomp, and like other really fun events. So that's mainly what SEC is focusing on right now. Besides events, we've been discussing student priorities in SEC and having discussions with administrators. Dr. Austin came in a few weeks ago. Ms. Lawrence came in this week. Some of the main things that we've been discussing are, one, improving counseling department resources and organization for students, especially students involved in the college application process, just to make sure that they're all aware of what they need to be doing, and like the brag sheet process and like the process of working through with the counselors for recommendations is easier. And the event tomorrow at Gun, which is college workshops that talks about a lot of things like the application process, the interview process, all of those things will be really helpful for seniors. We also talked about getting more students involved in decision making and making sure that like we have a wide variety of students talking about issues, telling SEC, telling the administration what they care about. And the last thing was accommodating a wide range of academic interests and courses so that students of all different interests and all like different focuses or things they care about can have their focuses and can have their academic interests expressed in the offered coursework. That's it.
Ms. Furrier?
Okay, I first off want to address the student discussion that came up, and then I'll do our updates from Pally. I just want to say, first of all, I'm really sorry that you guys are in this position, the robotics team, and I really want to thank you guys for coming out and speaking your voice, because I think any student speaking up for what they believe in is so important, and I'm really sad that you guys didn't feel like your voice was heard. So I just want to say ASB and Arjun and I both probably support any student's opinions and would love to follow up with you in any way we can. I also want to address the dress code opinion that was brought up, and I want to agree with the point that student dress code is really in need of reform. I've been through middle school, and my sister has as well, and had numerous issues with it, and my friends have as well, and it's very humiliating. And I think the board should follow up with that for sure and do more research on it. Now I'll go into some more updates about Pally. The biggest thing is we recently had our Centennial March. I saw Miss Baton Caswell there. It was super awesome. We marched from the Channing House, which was Pally's original site, with the marching band and the dance and cheer team. And it was really just a great community event to come together and celebrate our 100 years. And we met back in the pack with speakers and senators and community members. And it was just a really great event to celebrate our education in Palo Alto for 100 years. For ASB, we're in full swing planning Spirit Week, which is less than 2 weeks away. And we are planning a spirit swap, which is for kids to come in and bring items that they want to swap in for their past year's outfits and dress ups, so new kids can get new things, and it's kind of passing along the items, which is really cool. We have our homecoming dance October 27th, and we made it Great Gatsby themed, which is going to be really new and interesting. And we have our annual float building week, which is coming up. I highly recommend some of you guys come check it out, because at Pally it's extremely competitive and it's in full swing in less than a few days. And what our biggest thing right now is trying to find some more community members to help build the float bases this weekend, starting at 9 a.m., because all students will be there and we need all the help we can get. Lastly, in terms of visitors and ASB, we recently had our wellness team come in. They're super awesome at Pally. They want to get as much student voice as they can, and we gave a lot of feedback for them to improve their programs and end a stigma around the mental health services we have on campus. So there's a lot of new efforts coming into place soon. And lastly, we had Mr. Paulson come in to ASB to discuss the ongoing teenage vaping problem in our community. And we are working on some really funny and some really cool, interesting poster campaigns that will be coming out on our campus soon. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Furrier. The next item on our agenda is 4C, which is the Pally football team commitment to healthy relationships and promotion of a safe culture. Dr. Austin?
At this time, I'd like to bring forward Theron Wilborn. And is Coach Gifford here? No, okay. Theron, come on up. Tonight's a great night for us to just highlight a positive step taken by the Pally High School football team and the setting the expectation movement. And I'd like to have our Pally High School athletic director give us a little background.
So good evening, everybody. Our Palo Alto High School football team went through some coaching changes this past season, so we were able to bring in a Palo Alto High School alumni, Nelson Gifford, class of 1999. And one of the things that we wanted to do was definitely change the culture around our athletic program, specifically with our football program, not only on the field, but off the field, making sure we're making student athletes who are advocating for things that are going on in our community. We were able to connect with Brenda Tracy, who is campaigning around at local colleges and colleges all across the country in her Set the Expectation campaign. Her campaign is targeted at men, collegiate football players specifically, in hopes that they will step up against sexual assault, hazing, bullying that occurs on college campuses. We were fortunate enough to be across the street from Stanford, which was the first college institution to implement a Set the Expectation game. So when we look at our football schedule this year, we definitely wanted to have a themed game around Set the Expectation. There's a high school student athlete pledge that we altered to make more comprehensive for all of our student athletes, both male and female, and we had about 300 Palo Alto students sign that expectation. It was organized by our student interns in the athletic department, and we were able to have Ms. Tracy join us this past Friday at our football game, at our football pre-team meeting, and give her thanks in regards to our football program. Setting the expectation is not only for our football program, it's for all of our student athletes, and really hoping the leaders within our student athlete community can leverage their leadership and use their platform to the general student population at Palo Alto. We're not only setting the expectation against sexual assault, bullying and hazing, but also setting the expectation about what it means to be a student athlete at Palo Alto High School. So moving forward, I think that the entire athletic department will look at ways they can set the expectation and maybe make it specific to their individual program. But we're definitely proud of Coach Gifford and the football team for taking that stance and really igniting something in the high school community. So thank you, Dr. Austin.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of community comments on this item, John Fitton and Kathy Jordan.
Thank you. I want to express appreciation and gratitude. I work with the RISE Task Force under direction of Karen Hendricks, and have met with Dawn and Karen recently this year. We're going to be moving forward with our programming this year. But the gratitude immediately is expressed towards Theron and Coach Gifford and each and every member of the Pally football team and all the students who stood up and stood into this issue. As we know all too well, not just in our district here, but across the country, this is an issue of fear and anxiety, and deservedly so for many. And to have our young men step forward, stand up, sign a pledge that they will prevent sexual harassment, sexual assault, sexism, bullying, harm to self, harm to others in our community, not just for themselves, but for their teammates, to keep each other safe and to keep the community, their sisters in the community, their fellow students in the community safe, is a profound move. Again, I understand it was Theron's leadership, and I want to thank you personally for it, Theron. When I thanked Coach Gifford, he said, no, it was Theron's idea. So thank you to you. I also want to say to Coach Gifford, about Coach Gifford, I haven't met him yet, but I'm going to thank him personally as well. I hear wonderful things about his integrity and what he's bringing to the team. The RISE work will continue this year. We learned a lot last year under Karen's leadership. And Don, you've stepped right into this issue. I want to thank you. Adam Paulson, we've met with. I know he's left this evening. We want to thank him for his leadership so far. Ken and Jennifer, I want to single you out as well as all the other board members. You've met with us extensively and have supported this issue. So thank you for the progress we've made. We have many miles to go on this issue. We're not going to rest until we're strong, if not best practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Jordan?
Regarding the football team and the Set the Expectation Pledge, I'd also like to congratulate them and those who helped to organize it, as well as to read part of it and make some comments. One part of it says, I pledge to display courage and stand up against sexism and violence against my peers and others. I will not stay silent. If I see something, I will say something. I will respectfully challenge other members of my community and hold them accountable for their words and actions. In the spirit of this pledge, I'd like to talk about the 14-year-old girl who alleged sexual assault in the October 2016 incident at Pali, in the Pali bathroom. Our community, including all of us here, have tolerated labeling this incident as consensual. I wanted to take this opportunity to point out that the Pali girl had just turned 14. The legal age of consent in California is 18. The victim could not legally consent. And more importantly, she said she did not consent. She said that to the Pali counselors, to the Pali administration, to the police. And that's according to the Cozen report, a district commissioned and paid for report. She also said the same to KTVU, to the Mercury News, and to the Palo Alto Weekly. There is a police sex crimes report for October 14th, 2016 at 50 Embarcadero Road, which is Pali. Yet, despite all of her reporting alleging sexual assault, her side of the story has not been told in certain forums. In the spirit of this pledge, it's time for our community to stop tolerating labeling this incident as consensual. I'd appreciate other members of the community to step up in the spirit of this pledge and have the courage to say that the labeling of this incident is inappropriate and unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from board members? Ms. Godfrey?
I just want to comment that I really feel like this sets an example for one sort of brick in the wall that sets the stage for changing culture. When we have teenagers who want to change culture, that's where it starts, right? There's that old saying in business that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And culture change takes time, but starting with the teens who see it and feel it, that feels the most important. And it's amazing to see how we can talk about respect and consent in a way that's open and honest and important versus all those years ago when we went to school, when there just weren't things you talked about. It is so important to make that kind of a change, to make those conversations everyday talk about how we do things and how we live our lives and how we change culture. So I think whoever actually gets credit for this, they all get credit for it. We shouldn't be parceling it out. There's lots of credit to go around. So I appreciate this step, and I appreciate you sharing with the board.
Ms. Bain-Caswell?
I want to thank you. I can't see you behind the pole. But I also want to thank the students, because this idea could have come forward and the students could have decided not to pick it up. And so I would like you to take forward to the students when you have the next meeting with the football team to thank them for stepping forward on this. I also want to follow up on Ms. Furrier's point earlier, which is we have some other problems on campus as well. And if the students take ownership for the problems on campus that they can make a difference on, then the culture at the school, at all of our schools, will be what they would like it to be. And so I encourage ASB to have some conversations about that as well. It's not just sexual assault, it's vaping, it's the way we treat each other just day to day. It's a lot of different things. And I look forward to this as a positive first step. And I want to thank you for pushing.
Just to echo my appreciation, looking at the student pledge, to know that I think you said over 300 of our athletes took this pledge. These are often leaders of the school, and they set an example. And to have them living towards this pledge, it really sets an example that, like my colleagues have said, really works to change culture. And so with so many different aspects between the RISE task force and site leadership and our wellness centers, and now this, together, that's what really starts to affect culture. So I'm really grateful for it. Thank you for your work, and thanks to the student athletes.
Ms. Furrier?
I just want to reiterate the gratitude that you're receiving. I want to say that ASB fully supports signing the pledge and setting the expectation with student athletes, and we actually recently discussed taking that on as a project in collaborating with the athletic department. And I also agree with Ms. Baton-Caswell that there's a lot of other things that we can take on, and I think this is a great first step for students to set the expectation. Thank you.
Mr. Prabhakar?
Yeah, I'm really proud of the Pali students for taking this up, and I hope that like the idea of pledges can be expanded beyond just the athletes at Pali, maybe to other people in the district as well, and maybe on other issues. Yeah.
Well, I want to express my appreciation as well. This has been, I think, a dark couple of weeks in terms of the news around sexual assault. I'm thinking obviously of our neighbor, Dr. Ford, and how she has been treated on this issue. And I think about how different it would have been had some of those high school athletes back then had the kind of training that and taken the kind of pledge that we're talking about. There's always somebody there who could have made a different decision. And so I think producing a whole bunch of our students who are going to make that different decision is a tremendously powerful contribution. So thank you for that. And I'm heartened by all of the progress that I'm seeing at our campuses. Thank you very much for this item. Let's move on then to item 4D, ACT preparation course and test administration. Dr. Austin.
I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Ofek to introduce our guest tonight and frame it up.
Good evening, everyone. A little hard to follow such an amazing effort by the Pali Athletics Department, but I am very happy to have Dr. Judy Argumedo here, who is the Director of Academic Supports, to share with you a little bit of information, which is actually also written in the board packet, about the opportunities we're trying to create and provide for students to participate in the ACT during the school day. And with, a targeted population that she'll address. So I'll turn things over to Judy, who will share some academic success.
Excellent. Good evening. So for the third year, the Department of Academic Support, in collaboration with Research Evaluation Assessment, is sponsoring a free ACT administration to eligible 11th and 12th graders. The eligible students are voluntary transfer students, first-generation students, and students who demonstrate a financial need. Planning of the free ACT begins in the year before, in late April, along with the guidance staff from both high schools and Janine Penny from REA, to ensure that all 504 and IEP accommodations are input into the test. That's really important to us. So the ACT, as Ms. Ofek said, is given during the day, and it's truly a valuable opportunity because it's a stress-free environment, it's at the school, there's no transportation, and best of all, it's free for the students. This year, unfortunately, the October 2nd was canceled nationally. I did have a little bit of a heart attack when they canceled it, because I thought it was just Palo Alto, but it wasn't, it was nationally. But we were able to reschedule, so they're going to be October 30th is when we're going to give the ACT. And it's after homecoming week, so that's another great for us win. But I'm also proud to talk about the second year that the ACT prep course was given, and that was under the direction of the board, really asked us to give students more support, and so we did give it the second year. And recruitment for the prep course is difficult because we're asking the students to give up 3 Saturdays, 4 hours each Saturday from 10 to 1, to come here to the district office and just study. And so we do recruitment through the counseling staff. We send flyers in Spanish and English. And then we do some walking recruitment at Buena Vista Mobile Park Home. And this year, Melissa Baton-Castle came with me again, and Don Austin and Sharon at OFECT, and Mr. Arquimedo from Fletcher Middle School. And we go door to door to all the eligible students, and we ask them to come in, and we kind of push their parents. And what we also do is we offer transportation. So we pick up the students from East Palo Alto and from the Buena Vista Mobile Park, and we bring them here. And then we do offer them free lunch and pizza. And the pizza is sponsored by the PTA, and the students really appreciate that. I let them know that the PTA is giving them the free lunch, and they've all let me know that they feel very valued, that like the PTA is doing that for them. So all in all, it's a great opportunity. And I have some other little just facts. So the test costs about $58 per student, and it's covered by Title I funds. And we also give, not all students, we understand, can make the ACT prep course, so we do offer them the book. They have to contact either a counselor, we target AVID courses, or they can come to my office and we give them a free ACT book. And so I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much for that report. Any comments or questions, board members? Mr. Brienza?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the update, and thank you for all the efforts. It's clear that it's a community effort, from knocking on doors to supplying lunch, to getting the information out in various languages, and that makes a big difference. I'm glad to know that's there. It seems like hopefully there's some way to keep growing that number. It's such a great opportunity, and I'm sure it's on a Saturday hard to get kids there, but the fact that we're providing it, hopefully over time, it'll grow a little bit each year and we'll be able to get more students there. But I'm glad to see it's happening, and thank you all for the work you're doing on it.
Ms. Godfrey, I'll just, I don't know.
Dr. Arquimedo, I was sorry I couldn't join you this year on Knocking Doors. I did find when we did that last year that connecting with parents who may not have gotten the word when maybe their kids had gotten the word was super valuable. Being in the middle of those conversations where the student is saying, I might know something about that, the parent's saying, I don't know about that. So I know how hard it is and how much time it takes, and I very much appreciate it. Ms. Baton-Castle, I appreciate that you went again this year. We went together last year, and I know it's outside your normal work hours and you're knocking on doors, and the benefit is you get to meet all the pets, right? The dogs and cats. But all of the work as a whole is appreciated, and I just want to call out that part because I've seen with my own eyes what it means when the parents' eyes light up and the students thinking, oh, man. That's it.
Thank you.
Mr. Collins? Ms. Baton-Caswell?
Yeah, I want to thank you for pushing this program. I think that I look forward to a time where every single one of our kids has the opportunity to take the ACT or the SAT without having to figure out that they have to take it. I personally am a proponent for AB 1951 for this reason, because I really, really think that in other states where they've made it, just everyone takes it. It's not, you don't get pulled out as just, you have to do it on your Saturday. It's something that just everyone's doing. Those states where they've done that, the kids are better prepared to take the opportunity of applying to college, and they're in a better place to be successful. I think it's great that if a student didn't sign up for the 4 Saturdays, is it 3 Saturdays or 4? 3 Saturdays, that we would provide a book to them. How many books were we able to hand out?
This year I handed out 50 books.
So I think that that's actually, we don't know how much work students are doing on their own. maybe there's some way to incorporate some support for this effort during the school day next year. I'm not sure exactly how you would do that, but it seems like that might help on the margin. You may have to work on the margin here because it is hard to take students out for 3 half-days, basically. Although I'm sure it would be great if we could see how those students did on the ACT.
We are collecting that data.
Okay, so, I mean, if we can come back and show that the students that took the preparation did better, I think, and then you can show where they're going to college. I mean, sometimes you just need to be very specific in black and white about how these things can help. If there's any way I can help you with this for the next year, I would love to do that.
I will email you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Student board members, any comment? Mr. Prabhakar?
Yeah, so the ACT and like other standardized test prep can be really stressful. So I'm glad that like this opportunity exists for students, and the test fees are waived and like there's preparation. So thank you for doing this.
Ms. Furrier?
I agree exactly with what Arjun just said. I think this is so valuable for students to have this opportunity. I do have one question about who is teaching the courses. You said that the counselors choose the teachers of the prep course, and I was wondering like who exactly that is.
So we contract with a company called Tutor Corps, and so they provide the 3 courses. And so we look at we were able to choose who the facilitator is of that course. And so they've had practice before, and usually they're teachers from other districts who specialize in that.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Really terrific program. Thanks very much for the work that you're doing and for the report. Let's move on then to our action items. Item 5A is El Carmelo Elementary Magical Bridge Program. Dr. Golton.
Hi, good evening. First, I really respect and appreciate the 2-meeting rule. However, in this case, we're asking the 2-meeting rule be waived. We have, a year ago, we applied for and got a matching grant from the county for a Magical Bridge playground at Addison School. An opportunity literally popped up in September to have another application round. The county is having another application round with a really short deadline. The deadline is October 12th. So at any rate, we needed to do this, well, not fast. We needed to do it to borrow a term, we need to do it at warp speed. And so we have. It's good. The I's needed to be dotted and the T's crossed, and so we worked with the elementary division to pick a school. El Carmelo is a logical school. It's a logical school because we're doing work on it. We're doing the multipurpose buildings with the current bond. And in addition, it's a simple school in the sense that there's for all of us that know the El Camino location, it's El Carmelo location, it's just the south area, that's it. Can't be any place else. And so it's easy to understand where to put it. There was work to be done. The principal, Danae, we've worked with her. She's a very experienced principal, and she worked with, that is, we didn't want to say, well, guess what, board? We've picked El Carmelo School. Similarly, Danae, we wouldn't want to put her in the position where she says to her staff, oh, we've got a surprise for you. Guess what? I, the principal, have decided to do this playground. And so she did all of the work with the site council and with the PTA and with the leadership group at the school. And they all, well, of course, they all signed on. Everybody likes these accessible playgrounds. So what we're asking you to do tonight is to approve a grant to the county, and then that will give us a whole 3 days to finish writing this grant and get it sent off. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Dr. Golton. Do we have any cards or comment cards on this item? No? Okay. Oh, we do. Let's hear then from our community first, Kathy Jordan.
Thank you. With regards to waiving the two-meeting rule for this, I noted in the materials that it said 3 weeks ago that staff were notified that there was another opportunity. I know that there was a board meeting 2 weeks ago. So I guess I'm curious why, in trying to respect and honor the two-meeting rule, that it was not placed on the agenda of that meeting 2 weeks ago, if knowledge was gained 3 weeks ago. Secondly, I guess also there's always the opportunity to call a special meeting as well, to approve an item that to try to be respectful and honor the two-meeting rule, which is also an opportunity that the board could take to be respectful to public input as well. Thank you.
Dr. Galton, looks like you want to make a comment?
Yes, I would. The answer is yes. We could have decided 3 weeks ago to take 1 week and place it on the agenda. The agendas are very carefully formed here, and so if we'd done that, there wouldn't have been any opportunity to interact with the community. Again, there wouldn't be any opportunity we could have sort of unilaterally decided to do that, but frankly, I don't recommend working that way. The school community needs to have the opportunity to understand this and discuss it, and so that's it. I can't respond to the notion of an emergency board meeting for this one item.
Thank you, Dr. Galton. Board member comments and questions, beginning with Ms. Baden-Caswell. Dr. Galton, you're probably going to be needed, I'm not sure.
No, actually, I'm going to make a couple of comments. I don't think I have questions per se.
Okay.
Well, stay up there just in case I do. I am a huge fan of the two-meeting rule, as many of my colleagues are well aware. On the other hand, I know how important it is for the schools to have input in their own decisions. So if we had brought something forward for the El Carmelo community and they hadn't been part of the discussion, I know we would have gotten huge blowback for that. So I understand that we were in a time crunch here. Given that we've made a commitment as a board to progressive parity, and Addison Playground, the inclusive playground, is one that we've already improved, I can't imagine that we would be unhappy to have the opportunity to get matching funds to do another one, because it's a fabulous thing that they're available to us, quite frankly. When Senator Simitian told me he had matching funds for playground for us, I sort of didn't expect it. I thought someone else would want that matching funds, but it seems like it's open for us to take advantage of. We have 12 elementary schools, and we want to have 12 inclusive playgrounds. So if we can get started and get this in place even before the Addison one goes, I'm for that. I'm a huge proponent of the two-meeting rule. I'm even more of a proponent for progressive parity. And I think that this district, that has been our motto all along, progressive parity. I don't want people to feel that we're favoring one school over another. So thank you.
Mr. Brianza?
I don't have any questions.
Ms. Godfrey?
I don't have any questions. I'm, of course, ready to support this and appreciative that the county's made this available and is actually moving really quickly.
Mr. Collins?
I have no questions and would like to make a motion if the chair. I move that we waive the two-meeting rule on this item.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, student board members, this is a preferential vote on whether to waive the two-meeting rule for this item.
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Two-meeting rule is waived.
And I'd also move to approve I guess that you're asking for the approval of the application, to make an application?
Yes.
I move that we approve authorizing the staff to make an application.
I'll second.
Okay,
Now, did we forget to allow our student board members to comment?
I was about to ask if there was any comments. Yeah. Student board members, any comments?
No.
Okay, I'll obviously support this, this motion. Is there any further discussion? Student board members, preferential vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So that motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Colton.
Thank you.
Go get money.
The next item on our agenda is item 2D from the consent calendar, approval of purchase orders. Mr. Collins, you wanted to make a comment on this item?
Yeah, I have a question that I asked but didn't get answered prior to the meeting, so I'll ask it again. There's a item for $150,000 for, I guess, it says Amy Oppenheimer. I don't know if it's the law offices of Amy Oppenheimer or it's her individually. And you did answer the question about whether this was part of our legal budget, and I think we're treating it as not part of the legal budget. I did want to also point out that if in fact, even if she was an investigator, only an investigator, but was acting as was asking us to sign an engagement letter, I think that would require board approval. We have run into that in the past, and I wanted to make sure the policy was well understood, because otherwise we end up signing up with lawyers that the board has not approved. The question I had, though, specifically was, it's a purchase order for $150,000. If we're using her as an investigator, I thought we had an internal investigator. So the question is, given that we have hired a full-time internal investigator, Ms. Hendricks is nodding, $150,000 seems like a lot of authorization. A typical investigation, I think, costs 15, 20, 25? Yeah. 6 to 11,000. Okay, so 150 seems like a lot of investigations, especially since we have a full-time.
Could you hold up, because I'm not sure actually that, I think your question was heard, but I don't think that Ms. Hendricks' mic was on when she answered it.
Fumbling with the mic. It can range depending on the scope of the investigation, so 6 to 11,000, sometimes up to the range that you're speaking of.
Right. So I guess I would prefer not to authorize such a large amount, since we've budgeted a full-time investigator and have one on staff. We haven't always in the past. So I guess I'm curious why the requested authorization is as large as it is.
This was just based upon history. In the last year, we spent about that amount of money, and it may be less than that. So it was an authorization to have up to that amount. If we came in less, then we'd have budget savings. But it's as simple as that. That was based upon history in terms of how much we've spent in the past.
So would you be amenable, and Dr., I don't know who this question is directed to, there are so many competent people here, to authorizing a lesser amount? Because I would feel more comfortable authorizing a lesser amount, especially given the size of our legal bills. And this, while it is not a lawyer per se giving us legal advice, this is related to our legal compliance function. And I just want to make sure that we stay informed about what is going on there. And controlling the purse strings is one of the ways to stay informed. So would you be amenable to a lower amount?
Everyone's looking at each other, so I'll answer it. Sure. Yeah, we had the same discussion, and again, the amount is based upon history, and a condition has changed in that history. What is the impact of that? Yeah, it's going to be impossible to tell. So a reduction would be, to some degree, arbitrary, but I'm sure we could make a reduction. And I would lean on Ms. Hendricks for a suggestion on a number, but I don't think it's unreasonable.
Thank you. Yeah, it was held in the budget based on past history and brought forward as a not to exceed a maximum amount. I'm happy to go back and work with staff to take a look at that amount and see if it still matches what we project to be current need and bring back some ideas on that.
I don't know if you need the PO in order to expend funds.
Yes, we do. In order for her to be paid, it would probably be a good idea to approve an amount tonight. One of the reasons why we have this amount based upon history is that we don't have to keep coming back to the board for additional. So I would probably recommend a lower amount, but that really is up to Ms. Hendricks. In terms
Yeah, I
of
just wanted to point out so everybody's familiar, I know you are, that you can certainly come back and ask for more.
But it would be.
But it's just a way for the board to make sure that they're informed.
It would be beneficial to have an amount approved tonight, and then we can come back with an additional amount if possible. Otherwise, it's going to delay payment. It's up to you.
Can I make a suggestion? How about,
Please.
How about 50? Should be plenty, right? Plenty for getting started?
We can
50?
do that, and then
So
there'll
on-
be an additional request if we need additional funds. If that.
Yeah, I think that we could request approval of that amount tonight and then take a look at what we're projecting as need and come back to you with additional information on that.
Is this an annual, is this on as an annual? You're thinking that this is a year's worth?
Yes. That's what we spent in the past and over the course of last year, and that's what's budgeted for the year.
Ms. Hendricks, can I ask a question?
At some point, we need a motion to approve these purchase orders. And
I move that we approve the purchase orders with the amendment of that purchase order for Ms. Oppenheimer to be for $50,000.
I'll second that, but I think we still have some
Yeah, that's fine.
questions, so let's go around with that.
I just wanted to know, it looks like even though we have a full-time investigator, we still are finding we need to have the use of Amy Oppenheimer at times. Is that something it sounds like it's something you're still expecting going forward?
That's correct. We anticipate needing less services from Amy Oppenheimer's office. However, we could still need to rely on her for investigations. So
Okay.
we expect a decrease in the usage.
So one of our, can I?
Yes.
One of our requests from last time was to see the 2017-18 budget for legal, including investigators. I think that would help us have a sense of what we're spending and see if, that way this wouldn't be a surprise. Like, I asked the question, it's 150 for a year? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if that was a month, a year, 6 months.
It was the amount from last year, consistent with that.
So will we see that review of last year's legal costs, including investigations, in time for the next meeting?
Yeah, that's going to be in your update.
Excellent.
I'm not sure that I had written down the additional piece of the investigators, but we'll definitely make sure it's in there for you.
Thanks. I actually wanted to thank you because in the minutes I saw it in there and I was thrilled.
Excellent.
I know. Take what
So I had a
you can
question.
get.
My memory was, but this may not be correct, was that Amy Oppenheimer's specialty is workplace investigations and issues involving employees. Is that accurate, and is that part of what you expect her to be doing, or is this sort of solely around our Title IX and other anti-discrimination compliance?
And that's accurate. That's a specialty area for her office, and she's been utilized for 1312.1 investigations. She has been utilized for other investigations as well. We do have a Title IX investigator on board now in our office, so there should be a decrease related to that.
So you expect this to be focused largely on these other investigations, not entirely, but largely. Am I hearing that right?
That would be my assumption, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the purchase orders with the change to this one of Amy Oppenheimer's to change it from $150,000 to $50,000. Student board members, preferential vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that motion is adopted. Next item on our agenda is 6A. We're into now discussion items, and the first of them is board policy, changes to board policy 5113.2, work permits. Dr. Austin?
With each of the next three items, A, B, and C, staff is prepared to take questions. Otherwise, you've had the documents for review, and they've gone through Board Policy Review Committee.
Okay, I don't think we have cards on this work permits item, right? Okay. Mr. Collins, or any comments or questions from board members on this one?
I have a quick question. In the AR on page 3, it says that superintendent or designee shall periodically inspect the students' grades and attendance records to ensure maintenance of academic progress and any additional criteria established in board policy. how does that actually happen, and how does that happen? I'm not sure who to ask. Dawn, does that actually happen, and how does it happen?
Well, in my great experience here, yeah, in this case, the designee could be one of several areas. I'm looking at Ms. Ofek, who's going to give you, who's going to give you a better
I had
answer.
the
although
microphone
mine was
passed to
gonna be
me.
great.
Okay.
We actually have a work experience coordinator at the high school who is working on these types of things for students. And we have a new person in that position, so there's a lot of review of past practices and revision of things this year. It's a bit of a year where we're taking a closer look at what we do and how we do it and how we support it. But we have a work experience person who does that.
So is that even if the students aren't taking the work experience class, they just happen to have gotten a work permit?
No, they do give work permits over at the high school, and in the summertime, kids have to come here actually to do the work permit paper process. So there is someone over there who does that also, their job. I don't know, I don't want to call them job coaches because that's actually someone's real job title, but there are people who do that at each of the high schools.
Okay. And so if a student during the year is working, but they're not part of the work experience class, someone is tracking to make sure they're still they're making academic progress.
Yes, but we're not, this part around, yeah, I believe we are. There's someone whose job it is to do that. My pen just rolled off.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question. It seemed like it would be hard to do when there's kids working and they're not doing the work experience class.
I guess I now didn't even pay attention to this when I was reading it, but now I'm wondering, so if I am a 15-year-old, or let's say I'm a senior, and I get a job delivering pizzas, and my grades start to fall, I'm just wondering if this is what we want to be doing. I'll look at the BPRC, since you guys brought this forward. Is this an optional paragraph, or is this a required paragraph?
No, I mean, staff might be able to answer that. I had some of these same questions. I wasn't aware of all these procedures as they are. But we talked a bunch about what made sense while keeping academics the first priority. I don't know if Ms. Ofek, no, I would say that paragraph is not an optional one. But I don't know if Ms. Ofek has anything to add. I'll give you a chance to read it.
I mean, it certainly makes sense to me if they're in work experience,
In work experience.
but this is not necessarily work experience. This just means they have a work permit.
Correct.
So I'm
We issue
17
work
years
permits.
old, I have to get a work permit to work. I'm delivering pizzas after school. Is this make sense for us to be tracking every one of those kids' grades and whether they can continue to have a work permit?
I think they work with the guidance counselors to do this. I certainly can get more information and return to you through our weekly updates or at a future board meeting. But I believe that this happens already.
I'm looking at Dr. Austin now. Is this, I mean, is this the language we want to have in here and want to be doing?
Yeah, honestly, I have not given this that level of thought, so what I would suggest, and I sat through the meeting. What I would suggest is that we bring this back as an action item and not consent, and answer as many questions as possible through the update.
Although this is the AR we're talking about.
Yeah, this is
and
the
we only
AR.
have to
Good
approve the
point.
VP. So we
okay,
might
that
still want to come back
changes.
and discuss the AR, but that's what.
Yeah, we can approve the board policy and have you go back and decide whether this makes sense to be following this in the AR.
Well then, okay, so, yeah, you're absolutely correct. So my question would we be comfortable handling this through updates and questions? Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to, as they said, we don't have to approve the ARs. And I only raised the question because it seemed like a hard thing to track. And if we're going to make a conscious decision to do it, we should do it. And if we're not going to do it, we should take it out.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, any more comments on this item? This is for discussion.
Oh, wait, we have a question.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Freer.
I think it's more for Ms. Ofek, but you're saying the work experiences teacher's job is to track the grades, and are we really sure that this is happening right now? Because I honestly have friends with work permits, and I actually took the work experience class, exploratory experience, which is like for volunteering if you don't want to have a work permit, and I have never heard of tracking grades. So I'm just wondering whose job it is to track the grades of students, if you know that.
I will absolutely get back to people, but I know that we have folks on both campuses who work with work permits and the issuing of the work permits and do some of this work.
Okay.
So,
Anyone else? Any other comments? Okay, so this will come back on the consent calendar for next meeting, sounds like. Next is Board Policy 3550, Nutrition Policy. Comments or questions? Do we have an item? Do we have any cards on this item first? Okay. Ms. Godfrey, any comments or questions on this one?
You know, I hate to say it, but we got a well-considered email at 4 p.m. that had great suggestions in it. And so I'm wondering if maybe we should take a pause on this one and let BPRC look at these suggestions.
Can I just clarify?
Or speak to them?
I believe that this email was sent in support of us adopting the changes we've already made. That everything in here, Mr. Shen was the person who asked us to reconsider this policy. It's one of the policies that we've changed without it coming from CSBA. And his request was basically, we were more specific in our nutrition regulations than we needed to be. And since he is closely tracking federal legislation and he sees them moving in a more healthy direction, he wants, his point that I think was well received by BPRC was that we don't want to be any more specific than we need to be, so that it gives us room when federal or state comes in and gets us more healthy, that our policy doesn't need to be changed to that, that we can just go right along with the federal guidelines. So as I believe Mr. Shen came and advocated for some specifics to be removed, we removed them, and that's the only change that has happened, and this email is just in support of those changes. Do you think now you're seeing something different?
I actually haven't read the email since
Yeah.
I was driving over here at
Yeah,
that
one of
time.
the-
So
One of the paragraphs starts with, "My proposal is to remove."
Yes, and that's been removed.
And it has been?
Yes.
Okay.
The specifics
All right.
have been removed, yes.
Okay, then I have no questions.
Yeah, I think his point, in fact, I think we returned this to this, basically to the CSBA model, because we had some local additions that were more specific than what was required. That's my memory. Is that right, Ms. Hendricks? You're nodding your head? Okay. We will bring this back. Let's bring this back on the action agenda for next time, just in case there's any issues with it, and we can just quickly adopt it if not.
you know what, put it on consent and we'll pull it off if
we
Okay,
we
that's
need
fine
I
too.
like that.
Okay.
Yes, but the email here of his proposal is exactly what he brought to CSBA, and to BPRC, and what we did.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm supportive of.
Great.
Okay, any substantive comments or questions on this? Okay, then let's move on to, so that will come back on consent, as we just decided, and we'll move on to Board Policy 1340, Access to District Records. We do have a community comment on this, so we'll hear that, and then hear any board member comments or questions. Kathy Jordan. This is on 1340.
Okay, thank you. I would like to bring your attention to this provision that you're proposing here. In order to help maintain the security of district records, members of the public granted access shall examine records in the presence of a district staff member. I don't know if I'm misunderstanding that, but to me, that seems an attempt to diminish our access to public records. So I'd like to discuss that with you for a second. From my viewpoint, the public's access is to its own public records. These are our public records. They're not the district's records. This is a public school district financed by our public tax dollars. So in fact, of course, student privacy must be respected when producing records for the public. but there actually are public records. So it doesn't make sense to me, I'm afraid, to hear that the security of district records might need to be maintained, because once district records are culled for a request and appropriate redactions have been made, those are public records at that point. Comey, do you want to correct me if I'm wrong? Why would being in the presence of a staff member be required to view our own public records at that point of our own public school district? What about the possible increased costs of suggesting that a staff member must be present? What about the decreased access for the public to their own records due to a staff member presence being required? What about the additional delay that would occur? I urge you to strike this provision as part of your considering adopting this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Staff want to comment on that, on the question from the member of the community about the rationale for this section?
First of all, I would like to say that this policy is fully aligned with CSBA right now. In relation to the last paragraph that Ms. Jordan brought up, it is an optional paragraph, so we may choose not to take that up. How I understood it and how I read that paragraph is to say, if you are coming into the office and saying, I want to see the budget book, for instance, or any other log that's kept in the district office, Public Records Act tells you that that should be made available as soon as possible, as soon as practicable. And in that instance, and if that's your original, it makes sense for somebody to stand there to make sure that pages are not eliminated and things like that. So that's how I understood it. But most of our work, as you know, is done electronically. So we pull information that's requested and electronically redacted and electronically provided to the person who's requesting it. And we also provide it, place it on our website. So that's how most of the work is done. So this section, I understood it to mean in relation to actual records that are in paper form. But it's optional. We can decide to remove that today if that's.
So just so that I understand, you're saying that this paragraph applies to district records that are examined at the district rather than to district records that are reproduced and provided to a member of the public.
Right.
Is there?
Ms. Jordan, we're not going to engage in colloquy, but I think that clarified, but other board members can also.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example? It sounds like the budget book is your example. I'm wondering why we might not decide, even if it was a budget book. Is there I think that's actually online. I'm wondering if there's an example of something that we wouldn't just make a copy of for someone and distribute it to them.
So in my personal experience, we haven't had a situation like that. We've always copied or scanned or provided it electronically. We haven't had this situation. But there could be situations that I'm not thinking of where the master copy is kept and the person wants to inspect the master copy. I don't see that there is any harm in having somebody be present.
Looks like we want to go around.
Looks like it. Let's see, hold on, let me just make sure I understand.
I think I was first on this one.
Okay, so Ms. Godfrey, did you have any question to comment? Mr. Collins?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Collins?
My only question is, could staff implement that policy without putting it in the official board policy? I mean, you just do it. If someone comes in and wants to view an original document, you say, here you go, and you have to watch it in the hallway. You can't take it into the bathroom. You can't take it into your car.
Well, then so should it say it in our policy?
Well, it doesn't have to, because they can just do it. We can strike it from the policy, and they can just do it.
Dr. Austin, did you?
Yeah, I just want to give you a different slant on it. I think we might be going down the road that it is a protection or barrier for the school district. It's exactly the opposite. Let me give you a practical way I've seen this used. I was in another district, and a request came in to see our electricity and our utility bills. That's a massive document over time. what this allows for is a person to come in and review the document, find the exact couple lines that they're really looking for without having to have a replication cost to the individual. So I've seen this done exactly the way this lays out, where somebody can walk in, see the stack, they go exactly to what they would have really had a hard time putting down in a meaningful way in a records request, find their item, and they're out of the office in 10 minutes. So I would just point you at a different perspective of why this item exists through the lens of CSBA.
So, sorry.
Yeah, keep going.
So I'm perfectly comfortable with that. So I guess just to ask my question again, would you be comfortable, given that it's potentially open to misinterpretation or different interpretation, as some community members have pointed out, would you be comfortable just striking it and having that be your practice? When people come in and want to view originals, you make that available and say, yeah, come on, you can sit at this table, but no, you can't take it, no, you can't move it to a private room where you might do whatever with it.
So put it in the AR is what you're saying.
Or put it in the AR, or just tell people do it that way.
I do have a suggestion. We could probably change the language to say if the master copy or the original exists and people want to inspect that.
So I understand that's an alternative. I guess I wanted to see what you thought of my proposal, which is just strike it and do it as a practice. If you don't feel comfortable with it, that's fine. I just wanted to understand.
I think sitting here on the spot, I don't feel comfortable giving you an answer.
Okay.
If that's a sticking point, I would suggest just bringing it back so I can give that the thought it probably deserves.
I'm going to echo Mr. Collins' discomfort with this sentence. Part of my discomfort is that we have the word shall in there, and it doesn't explain which ones are like this and which ones are not. I also worry that if we're not more explicit about it, it potentially will mean that people that are working that want access to our records will feel they have to take off time from work to come in and be in the presence of a district staff member. So I would suggest that you take it back and either clarify the language or take it out and move it to the AR or something to the AR.
Did you, well, I mean, I don't think if we believe it's ambiguous, I don't think moving it to the AR makes it less ambiguous or less.
Oh, no, changing and putting in the
Yeah,
AR.
I mean,
I think the language needs to be clarified.
Okay, I actually don't think the language is ambiguous, but because I think it's actually good to have a mandatory, I think one of our responsibilities is to maintain the integrity and security of records, and so leaving it to the discretion of an individual staff member, whether the person viewing the records looks like somebody who might cause them damage or something like that, just doesn't seem like a good idea to me. I can see adding a clause, something like, in order to help maintain the security of district records inspected on site, members of the public granted access shall examine records. I mean, we can take this back to the...
Okay, it's not all district records. It's district records where having an electronic copy is problematic or
Well,
burdensome.
I mean, if for any reason it's inspected on site as opposed to provided electronically or on paper copies, then this would apply.
Okay, so
But
that's a clarification that would.
We can take it back. I mean, I can move to make that clarification. We can also take it back to the BPRC and talk about it then. Okay, we'll take it back to the BPRC. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, you can even take it back, make the change and put it in consent, and if one of us has an issue, we can pull it off consent.
Okay.
I'm going to put it.
Okay, why don't we do that?
That works. I think we've kind of crowdsourced an answer here.
Okay, any further comments or questions on this item? Okay. Then let's move to item D, dyslexia update. But before we do that, let's take a 5-minute break. If you belong up here, please return. Otherwise, have a seat, or you can take your conversations outside. We're going to get started.
Where'd Dr. Austin go?
Yeah, don't we have a superintendent?
So funny.
The next item on our agenda is 6D, dyslexia update. Dr. Austin?
I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Conaway, who's going to frame this up for us, but I can tell you, having spent some time learning more about dyslexia and steps our district is taking, pretty excited to hear some of the progress and then hear the discussion afterwards. Ms. Conaway?
Absolutely. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for me to provide an update to you on the tremendous work I believe we've been doing around dyslexia. Certainly, we have much more to do, but I want to give you a snapshot of how far we've come and talk to you a little bit about what additional steps we're going to be needing to take in the future to really get to a point where we have a strong program. Tonight, you're going to hear from Dr. Rita Rodriguez, who is our chair of the work group that was developed, and she is also what I call our resident dyslexia expert. She's too humble to say that, so I'll say it for her. In order for us to really frame this work up for you, I think it's extremely important for you to understand exactly why this work is so important. And I tried to frame it for you, and then I came across something that might be able to just give you a picture of how important this work is to our district.
My name is Jade. I'm in the 8th grade, and reading is a huge struggle for me. Teacher would ask me to read in front of the class aloud. I'd open my mouth, but no words would come out. Not because I couldn't speak, because I couldn't read the words on the page. They were jumping around, backwards, blurry, sideways. D was a B, W was an M. I just kept it all to myself. Like, no one can relate to me. This is just my problem, and I have to deal with it. I have to find a way to deal with this. Oh my gosh. I can still remember the names. Idiot, dummy, slow, special ed. It's like every day going through that takes a piece of you. After a while, you just you get this numb feeling, like it just doesn't bother you anymore. That's when you get really worried. That's when you should get really worried. When you get this numbing feeling, someone calls you something, you're like, I don't care. They're right. That's the worst feeling in the world. The teacher talked to me. They said, we know that you have this ability, and we know how to help you. I would go through one line, she's like, okay, stop. And then she said, and then she had on the board, like, it was like she already knew I was coming. Each word was separated. And she had this special board with, little dots. And she was like, what does this sound? What is this word? I'm like, it's an S. S. And I felt really stupid, but at the end of the day, I could say that sentence. I would just walk around at the dinner table. I'm reading. I'm everywhere. In the car. I'm sitting down in my roller skates, reading a book. I walked into a treat. I had finished a book, and I felt awesome. And she reads the book, dancing around in my dad's football jersey. She's completed the championship. I'm serious. And the crowd goes wild. I still have that jersey. I do. And it smells terrible.
This is why I'm an educator and not a tech giant, so, yeah. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Rodriguez to frame up some of the facts that's important for us to know about dyslexia, and then we'll get into a little bit about some of the tremendous work our staff has done. Ms. Rodriguez?
Thank you. What you heard Jade describing is direct, systematic, explicit, cumulative, and multisensory supports that she's receiving through trained educators, which is the goal that we have in the dyslexia work group. So the last time we were with you in January of 2018, we were able to pass the PAUSD dyslexia resolution. So thank you so much for your commitment to the work and to the work group. Just to remind everyone who may not have been here that night, dyslexia is a learning disability that is neurobiological and is characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and poor spelling and decoding abilities that result from a deficit in the phonological component of language. It's often unexpected in relation to cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. And so secondary consequences can include difficulties with reading comprehension, vocabulary development, and background knowledge across subject areas due to reduced reading experiences, as well as the social, emotional, behavioral impact. And so dyslexia impacts students differently for each student, and it's based on the number of risk factors, as well as the severity and type of the condition and the protective factors that students have in their lives and the supports that they receive. So students with dyslexia learning needs exist on a continuum, and schools should therefore address the needs of students within an integrated and tiered MTSS RTI system. So students who exhibit characteristics of dyslexia can typically be educated in general education classrooms, but they need a wide variety of targeted interventions and supports across the MTSS RTI spectrum. And so those supports must include direct, systematic, explicit, cumulative, and multisensory types of educational supports delivered by, again, these trained educators. And so the work of the team this past year has really been focused on training educators across the district to provide this type of instruction. So primary characteristics of dyslexia include difficulties reading words in isolation, including decoding, difficulty remembering high frequency or sight words, difficulty decoding unfamiliar words, difficulty with the speed and accuracy of oral reading or fluency, difficulties with spelling and written expression, and reading comprehension. And in the later grades, this can impact things like solving word problems in mathematics and/or learning a foreign language, just to name a few of the ways students might be impacted. Students can learn strategies and techniques for improving their reading skills, but dyslexia, it's important for the board to remember, is a lifelong condition that may require supports and accommodations and assistive technology in the years that the students are with us here in the district. So as the researchers, the Sharewitzes, have pointed out, dyslexia often occurs in a sea of strengths. So not surprisingly, many high-profile successful individuals are also dyslexic. Since the dyslexia guidelines were published by the CDE in August of 2017, the dyslexia work group here in PAUSD has offered numerous training and workshops for various stakeholders across the district, including school psychologists, teachers, specialists, and the PK-12 leadership team. And we have partnered with leading dyslexia researchers and specialists. We've also collaborated with the Orton Gillingham Professional Training Institute and sponsored a week-long intensive training for 30 district teachers, including reading specialists and educational specialists. And we've also piloted an online training course for all teachers, ultimately launching a dyslexia workshop for elementary educators that was delivered to all elementary teachers in the district, but most by the end of last academic year. So we've thus been able to, so far, reach all general education teachers at the elementary level in PAUSD. In addition, we've created a website of dyslexia resources for teachers and made that available to teachers across the district. We've produced these training modules and delivered them to sites, and this was done through administrators, teachers, and specialists, including school psychologists, with the goals of raising awareness, building empathy, and providing strategies to recognize, teach, and remediate students with dyslexia in the classroom. We surveyed the teachers who were participated in the workshop, and it revealed that 95.2% of the Teachers who were in the workshops agreed that they had a better understanding of dyslexia as a result of the workshop, and and others who were in that other percentage indicated that they had actually advanced knowledge of dyslexia going into the training. 80% of the respondents felt that the goals of the workshop were met, primarily that our goal was to define dyslexia and raise awareness and empathy among our teaching staff. In addition, our teachers have attended workshops at Teachers College this past Friday. During our professional development day, 15 educational specialists and aides were trained in the Pride Orton Gillingham reading program. So just to kind of, in summary, say there's a lot of exciting work, and as Dr. Conaway said, there's a lot of work to be done, but we're really looking forward to, and I just want to highlight in closing all of the work ahead. We've expanded our work group to include parents, some of whom are with us here tonight, additional teachers and specialists and administrators across the district, and we held our first expanded work group meeting on September 24th with 3 other meetings planned throughout the year, and of course much work happening in between those meetings. We will continue training for targeted groups of teachers to implement these multisensory strategies and structured reading programs. We'll provide additional education workshops and create new modules, particularly for secondary teachers and staff, as well as preschool teachers and staff. We will share newly adopted procedures with the board and community through guidance documents and a handbook, which are under construction at the present time. And we will continue partnerships with parents around communication, identifications, and services available to students. We really look forward to the work ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rodriguez. I appreciate that. So we haven't really done much this year. But no, we have actually put quite a lot of effort into making sure that we are building capacity in the district. And part of that building capacity is about making sure that all of our teachers are aware of how to recognize the signs of dyslexia so that we can respond as early as possible. So the crux of the work is about early identification. So obviously our elementary teachers are a focus for us. However, the biggest challenge we're facing right now is how do we approach this at the secondary level? So our expanded dyslexia work group is going to assist us with making sure that we're developing key strategies targeted for our secondary level group. So more work ahead. So we still have, and I lost my, here are the next steps. There are a couple of things that we are going to make sure that we get done between now and 2020. Those are the deliverables that will be essential for us to really implement a strong framework. But I have to tell you, even this, as important as it is, has to be framed in the context of multi-tiered systems of support. You've heard MTSS, you've heard RTI. It is time for us to really start building that framework in a way that we can see the outcomes for our students. So if I were to ask the board for anything, is to continue to support the work around MTSS and make sure we stay honest and accountable for making sure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. We have cards from 2 community members, so we'll start with them. That's Elaine Heel and Kimberly Eng Lee. Ms. Heel.
Hi, I'm Elaine Heel. I'm a parent of some dyslexic students here in PAUSD. First, I'd like to thank Ms. Conway and Dr. Rodriguez and the dyslexia work group for all their work, and the board for their commitment and work on this issue and addressing dyslexia in our district, as I think that's an important thing to do. And as Ms. Conway said, we have made some progress, but we still do have a ways to go. And building capacity is a great goal, and I've seen some efforts in that endeavor over the past year with some of the trainings that were described. And we've done, as a district, done some trainings with a variety of specialists and teachers in a variety of programs. However, I still left wondering if the trainings are done as part of an overall context of an overall program and for addressing dyslexia in the district. And for example, I wonder if data has been kept subsequent to these trainings For example, for the teachers who were trained, are they using the programs? If they're using them, are they using them with fidelity? If they are using them with fidelity, is student progress being tracked on a district-wide or site basis to see what kind of progress is being made? In other words, are these programs working? Were they the right ones? Are they helping our students? Should we be doing more training in these programs or perhaps different programs? And also, as Jade pointed out to us so clearly, the social emotional impacts are very clear and happen very early and continue throughout the school career for these students. And I didn't see as big a focus on the social emotional impact, and it is great to train the teachers, and of course, teacher and student empathy for dyslexic students is critical going forward, but the social emotional piece of being a dyslexic student, and I know from hearing from my dyslexic students every day with what they go through at school, is a very important piece of this puzzle as well. And I look forward to working with the dyslexia work group and partnering with the district going forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly Yang Lee.
Hello, Kimberly Eng Lee, chairperson for the Palo Alto CAC. So at the heart of it, all parents want their children to be educated and included, regardless of race, natural ability, or family income. Kids with inherent differences and disabilities are protected by federal law, with the basic tenet that special education provides interventions and services, so students are well educated in our public schools. Dyslexia, a neurobiological difference, presents a unique situation. Students who have dyslexia are general education students first, but help for them crosses multiple programs for response and remediation, which are often siloed in most districts, including our own. So we have the unprecedented opportunity and challenge to coordinate our cross-disciplinary efforts to optimize educational practices and protective factors. The CAC acknowledges PAUSD's initial steps to build awareness and implement evidence-based instruction for elementary students with dyslexia. We also acknowledge that these efforts are not designed to delay addressing the needs of students identified on a case-by-case basis. For the sake of improving all students' outcomes, our school board has approved multiple plans to address effectiveness, efficiency, and compliance. The Special Ed Review of 2017 introduced the concept of MTSS. Accompanying the dyslexia resolution in January 2018 was a straw man proposal predicated on a full-time MTSS coordinator. And in May 2018, the equity plan contained a proposal for 5 MTSS specialists. Yet here we are, October 2018, Dyslexia Awareness Month, with no specific funds or individuals dedicated to MTSS in order to make systematic, meaningful progress towards this board's stated priorities for equity and access. Tonight, you committed a whopping 0.2 FTEs to Dr. Rodriguez's assignment. The most vulnerable students expose our weaknesses, but present us an opportunity to create the systematic approach. Will you, the board, query the data, look for the plans, and fund the work that will reduce disproportionality and the questionable academic, social, and emotional consequences for the poor, those with special needs, and those in the minority? The LA Unified School District has a robust MTSS strategy and is on track to deliver their dyslexia plan. I can share a copy of their guidance document. Our district's work in professional development thus far is admirable, but we are only in the early stages, and current resources are operating at capacity. This initiative isn't fully funded or fully staffed, yet the expectations are there from you and from the public. My question is, what will you do next so our district actually makes deliberate and meaningful progress? Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions from board members? Ms. Baton-Caswell?
Well, I want to start with, this for me is a really, really important area. It's personal. I have some problems in this area that were never diagnosed, and I had to figure out how to get and do everything that I did with my, it's like having a bum knee, but you still have to get out there every day and be on the team, and you still have to play all the sports. My situation was not as bad as my son's situation. As Richie, who was on the board last year, who said in a board meeting, and I'm sharing this for your benefit, Dr. Austin, oh, there's a physical thing here. This was so interesting. I thought I couldn't read because I was poor. And he was a senior. We have no excuse not to be good at doing something about this. We can have a leading role in working on this. Identification is really important, knowledge around teachers' understanding of this and compassion, but using data to see if the programs that we pick actually work, and changing those programs if they don't work is really, really important. If we need to fund staff to do this, we need to do it. I'm worried that we might identify kids as having dyslexia and then, without meaning to, putting them aside and saying, well, okay, those aren't the kids that are going to be successful. Some of the smartest people in the world, in the business world, in the scientific world have dyslexia, and we need to make sure that our teachers understand that, and that the kids that have these problems understand that early on, that they can still be an Olympic athlete with a bum knee. And I am very interested in knowing what you need to be able to do this, because if it's just a paper or a report that comes forward once or twice a year to us, and just a group of people who are getting together, we're not going to make any progress. If we need to invest in order to do this properly, we should. One thing that's going to happen is we may identify kids early on and maybe even have programs that work, but we're going to have kids that come into our district later on in their educational career, and we're going to have to address their needs as well. There are certain accommodations that make a difference for dyslexic students, but that doesn't mean those students can't be successful at the highest level. And I want to make sure that we have programs so that when we talk about the AAR, or we talk about advanced placement, or we talk about honors classes, that we have just as many kids with dyslexia in those classes too, because we have accommodations and we figured out how to support those kids to be successful. So I'm going to keep drumming on it, but I'm really glad that we're talking about it at a board meeting, and I'm really glad that you have a group together working on it. I just would like to make sure, and I'm looking at my colleagues here, make sure that we're funding this if we are talking about it, because otherwise we probably shouldn't be talking about it.
Mr. Brianza?
Thank you to the both of you and to the rest of the working group. It really, what you laid out is, in my mind, it never goes as fast as we would like it to go, but it's a model for legislation was passed in August. In September, we formed a working group. By January, we had a resolution. We spent the spring doing lots of training and building capacity. And here's where we are now at the start of the next year. And yes, we still have more work to do, but it's a great start. And you're building some really important building blocks. And I'm grateful for that and for the presentation. I'm wondering, this is sort of a curiosity question for me. I know that when the dyslexia resolution was passed and when we first heard about the new legislation, there was talk of having a better understanding of the kinds of targeted intervention that can make a difference. And one of the things that is still unclear to me is, it sounds like sometimes we're doing significant pullout to give those one-on-one sessions, and yet we're also training elementary classroom teachers to be able to recognize the signs. And I'm wondering how we balance that. I think a large number of hours of pullout while still not letting the students miss that much of their classroom instructional time?
Right. I think that's an excellent question. I think the important thing to remember is the guidance from the CDE is that we focus on building capacity of the general ed teacher to serve students with dyslexia in the general education classroom. So that means that every teacher who's serving our students needs to be ready and prepared to provide high-quality reading instruction. The great thing about the reading instruction they're proposing is that it benefits all students, not just students with dyslexia. So we're talking about good reading, good evidence-based reading practices across the district. That's going, and I think we're going to see outcomes for students with general reading disabilities and students who just happen to be slow learners.
And this aligns with our Teachers College Reading and Writing
Absolutely, yes.
program, which is wonderful. Great. And I am wary of us trying to move faster than our capacity can hold, and yet I am on board with this MTSS coordinator. Dr. Austin knows. We discussed this last year, we approved it, and I would like to see us, as quickly as is reasonably possible, continue to really push the envelope in that regard, because that's what's really going to, I think, really move the needle on this work, and instead of siloing different issues, but looking at our multi-tiered system of support, and also better address our needs in secondary. So thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Godfrey?
Yes, what my colleagues have said. So we are 5 board members, and between us, we have 15 children. And so that would suggest that we have at least 1 board member with dyslexia and probably 3 kids. So one of my kids falls into that category. Classic, runs in my family. She had ADHD. She has ADHD still, but her dyslexia was diagnosed until 9th grade. So missed opportunity, obviously. Lots of Jade's comments and Ms. Hill's comments about the social emotional toll resonate in my family. She's doing great now. She created her own accommodations, let's say, and her own strategies, but it probably would have been easier had she been diagnosed earlier. So I have a couple questions. One is I want to echo Ms. DeBrianza's comments about funding the MTSS head count. And I'm wondering, and this is probably a question for Dr. Novak, you may or may not know since you are pretty new. I can't remember where it ended up in our budget discussions. So we've gone through, as you know, multiple levels of taking things out, putting things in. And I know we've discussed it, and I just can't remember where it is. So if you could come back with that, that would be great, unless maybe, Ms. Conway, you know
Well,
already.
I do have some context, because this was one of the things that was requested in the special education plan. The decision was to do that as a rollout over 2 to 3 years. So basically that ask was cut in half. So we only, actually, I don't even think we quite funded half of that, but MTSS coordinator.
So we're going to discuss budget again. So as it moves up your list, it also moves up our list. My other question is about, one of the reasons we do this is because it's legislated, but I think one of the reasons it's legislated is because it's so common, and because it can be diagnosed early, and because there are strategies that work. I wonder if there are other things that are on your mind that we should be doing the same thing with. Like, should we be doing something similar for kids who have who are high risk for ADHD, or kids who are high risk for maybe mental health issues, or things that fit in this framework where we could say, we know there's a high prevalence of it, and we know we have strategies that can work on it, and we could get it early. So is there other stuff?
I'm excited that you even said that, because this is exactly where the point I'm trying to make with the MTSS approach, because that framework is going to help us first identify what supports and resources are available and align them based on the needs in the district or on a particular school. So once the MTSS framework is kind of put in place, people are trained on it, then what we have to start doing is making sure that we understand very clearly what we can offer in the district and what places we have gaps that we need to build capacity in to make sure that we can provide the resources.
So would another sort of obvious one to do be ADHD? Like, I know in my case, my daughter's first grade teacher was like, you should take that kid in.
So ADHD is extremely prevalent. Here's the caution. I have the same caution with dyslexia. it can tend to result in overdiagnosis, right? So the more we pay attention to it in the global way, and we should do it, I'm not suggesting we don't, but once we start doing universal screeners on certain things, what happens is everything becomes dyslexia rather than a student who may just have some difficulty learning. What I would advise is that we have a clear system for early identification, whatever that is. So it's not really identifying a particular area or a disability, but it is having a process in place to make sure that we're assessing regularly and doing universal screeners to identify where those needs are and where the rest.
Okay.
But I hear your question. It's about high prevalence and how do we make sure we're hitting those high prevalence areas.
Exactly, exactly. And there are things where there's a lot of overlap, as it says in the slide someplace. You know, the ADHD, dyslexia
ADHD
overlap
is a big
high.
one, and social
Right.
emotional concerns are as well. So,
Okay,
yes.
so, okay, great, thank you, that helps. Thank you for this work, to the whole team who's working on this.
Mr. Collins?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the update. So I think it's good. It's a good start. It's obviously work that we need to do. I would like to see us invest a lot more money in this. But in order to make that kind of investment, I would like to have a better understanding of how we will know we are getting the return. The key to making investments is being able to understand where you are and what you expect to happen, and then understanding if you are getting what you expect. If you don't do that, then you lose confidence in your investment because you're not sure whether you're getting a return, and eventually you turn your attention to something else. So I think something I'd ask for, and that I don't see in this document, is a clear expectation of, a clear layout of where we are in terms of establishing a baseline. And I see we're even getting, a goal is rough estimate of number of students known to have dyslexia. I mean, that's a pretty humble goal. But, you know, we are where we are, and we have to start with where we are. But more important, and this is something I really have not seen very much in our work, I'd like to see what exactly it is we expect to happen and how we will know whether it happened or not. Not in terms of delivering training to teachers. Those are input measures, right? I want to understand the output measures. Are the students actually having are we changing the trajectory of students? Because that's really all we're here for, right? That's really all it's about. So how do we know? I'd like to see a plan, because I don't think we have it yet.
Actually, we do.
Okay, well, let me tell you what I'd like to see, and then you can tell me whether we have it. I'd like to see a plan that says, what is our current baseline? What outcomes are we expecting to change? How will we know whether those outcomes have changed? And year by year progress on what we expect based on the level of investment that we're making, which puts us in a position to then say, okay, well, if I'd like to see more faster, please, if we invested twice as much, what would the outcome be then? If we invested 5 times as much, what would the outcome be then? That way we can build confidence that our investment translates into results in a predictable way, which gives us confidence to invest more. And I'd say that's something, Dr. Austin, I'd love to see for every investment that we make, because that's just, for me, axiomatic. If you have to have confidence. The community, and as well as all of us, need to have confidence that the investment's yielding the predicted return. And unless we say in advance what our expectations are, we won't know whether it does or not. So, sorry.
Yes, I would like to respond to that, because while we're in the early stages in terms of creating awareness and slowly building the number of teachers who are actually qualified to deliver the type of instruction that the California Dyslexia Guidelines prescribes, we're still in small doses. So let me give you an example. One of the trainings, the last training we did, which was this past Friday, was for ed specialists and their aides. Because we know that oftentimes there are aides who, spend a lot of time with students. And while we can have a big discussion about where there are some concerns there, my work is we know that's happening. So we want to build the capacity. We did the research and tried to identify a program that meets all of the expectations set by the California Dyslexia Guidelines. Not only did we find one, we found one that was relatively easy to implement. And the aides were trained along with the ed specialists. The requirement for them to even attend that training is that they commit to doing an assessment to collect a baseline, they collect data over time, and they present the outcomes of that data at the end of the school year. So we know where they started, We know what particular program they use. We even have it scripted out in terms of what that instruction looks like. And they are going to be required to provide that data back to us to make sure that it's working.
Okay, I think that's a good start. But if we're going to be talking about, and I hope we are, investing millions of dollars, I mean, let me just step back. I view dyslexia, addressing dyslexia as one of the biggest opportunities we have to improve the performance across all the students in our district. It's like, I view it as one of the biggest investment opportunities I've seen since I've come on the board to actually move the needle on all kinds of kids across the entire spectrum. I think that's great. I don't think that comes along very often. And so I would, one of the things that we have is money. So I would like to see us move a lot of money into this area, but we can only do it when we know that, we don't want to make a large speculative investment and then be disappointed, right? So we've got to build there. But part of the build is building the confidence that the money we spend now is yielding some predictable return. And so I really urge you, and I know I see Mr. Kohler here, I mean, we've really got to have that built into our mindset so that when you come back in a year and say, we want $2 million more to do blah, 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 we can say, the $1 million we spent moved the needle in this way. Because the problem is, I mean, if the $1 million we spent said, we ran a bunch of trainings, and that's great, we have to run the trainings, absolutely, this is essential, this is so important, this is great, but it doesn't give you the confidence to necessarily spend $2 million next year because you really don't know what you've gotten yet. And it's hard in education because it takes a long time, it's hard to measure. I mean, we all know the problems with funding educational research. But I urge you to keep that top of mind at all times because I think if we're going to invest $10 million to really move the needle, which I would love to do, then I would love to, we're going to need to see the return on investment case with the data to back it up. So
I appreciate you saying that, and here's the great part about the work that we're trying to do right now. That is, we are implementing reading programs that will get us almost immediate results. We can measure at the 4-week mark, the 6-week mark, the end of the year mark. So we're continually looking at the progress, and if we're doing it right, all of our students are going to share reading. I talked with the developer of the last program we purchased, and I said, well, does this work with students with low cognitive abilities? And she said, if this is done with fidelity, even those students who no one thought could read will be readers. So it's really a matter of making sure that we are attending to fidelity and we are holding people accountable for making sure they're using those practices.
Well, and measuring the result.
And
right?
measuring the results.
I mean,
That's the key. That's
ultimately, you find that out by whether you get the result.
Absolutely.
Right? Can I just ask one more question? It related to the thing you just said. So one of the things that confuses me is how RTI fits into this. Dyslexia is, for most people, a lifelong condition. RTI is a time-bounded intervention, or meant to be. One of the things that I think has not always been the case in our district is we haven't treated RTI as a time-bounded intervention. We've treated it as a long-term support, which my understanding at least is not what it is intended to be. And so what I'm trying to avoid is a situation where a kid gets into, gets an RTI or whatever, however we assign a kid to RTI, and they stay there for a year, when in fact they should either be returned, getting back into gen ed mainstream or being, getting additional supports through special education IEP. Can you address that?
I absolutely can. I think it's important to understand what MTS is all about. It is first making sure that we identify that there's a problem. So moving along the tiers, it's pretty fluid. A student can certainly get additional support at the tier 2 level. If they are responding well at the tier 2 and they've gotten to grade level, then we move them back down. But oftentimes we might see that the tier 2 is not intense enough or long enough, or the duration long enough for them to make progress, so we have to move them up to the next tier. The goal of RTI is to make sure that students are getting on grade level, right? So it takes some time, sometimes longer for some students. Some students may respond at tier 2 and not need any additional support. So I would challenge the notion that we keep them at the tier 2, tier 3 level, because this is not always a situation where there's some pull-out support for a student. Tier 3 more than likely. But at tier 2, it could be an intervention that's put in place in the classroom. Or it could just be that the student is receiving, additional instruction, in addition to their regular core work. So it doesn't hurt students to be in the MTS, in the system, in the RTI system. Once they start making progress, there is no need for them to receive any additional support if we've gotten them to where they want. Now, what you could see is that now we've increased the ante a little bit and increased the expectation, and want to provide some additional support for the student to reach the next level goal. So sometimes you'll see it then.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity.
One more question, or do you want to do the finisher all round?
Why don't we finish a round, and I'd like to hear from the student board members, and then we have another community card, and then we can have some more. Ms. Furrier?
I pretty much agree with everything that's been said. I think we have to take into account the public comment about gathering the data. I think that's really clear in helping form the structure for the future progress checks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I learned a lot from it. A lot of acronyms I didn't know before. That's good. So I just have a couple of questions. The first is, like, currently, how do we identify students with dyslexia, especially in elementary school?
That's a good question, because historically, dyslexia has really been off the radar in terms of expressly identifying it. Oftentimes, you'll see it identified as a reading disability. There's very little language in both the literature and in current practice here in the district and probably across the nation in terms of really looking at dyslexia as a disability that needs to be addressed singularly. So the work we have to do is making sure that we're identifying some mechanisms to identify those students at the universal screening level. We have now made sure that our psychologists have the tools to assess in a way that can pick up the dyslexia, and I don't know if Dr. Rodriguez is still here, who can probably comment on that. The California Dyslexia Guidelines requires now that our assessment involve those particular components that might lead us to identify dyslexia. So we're doing a much better job. That probably was the easiest part of the work. But it's the other work where the student hasn't gotten to the point where there's a formal assessment yet that we have to do more work around.
Okay, and my other question is, currently, is there a way to, like, measure the number of dyslexic students? Like, do we have data on this?
So I actually dipped my foot in the water in a little bit to try to figure out just how many students might be challenged, with dyslexia. I got some mixed results back because, again, remember, we weren't previously using the word dyslexia in our language and our documentation. So without that, what we would have to go back and look at are those specific elements that are markers for dyslexia. Some of the numbers I started to get back were a bit startling, I have to tell you. There were, one school sent in information and indicated there were 25 students who had reading disabilities. Of those 25, we think 23 of them have dyslexia or have markers of dyslexia. So I'm cautioning everyone to make sure that those markers are just that, markers, and we don't move too swiftly on identifying dyslexia as the disorder. But I would venture to say that we are probably very close to the national average, which is about 20% of school-age students. We may even be a little bit higher in this particular district.
Thank you.
Dr. Rodriguez, did you?
Question around identification. So I think, we talked about all the trainings that have taken place across the district in the past year, and I just wanted to highlight that a key piece of the MTSS RTI work in training the reading specialists was in the Orton-Gillingham method, was for them to be able through the referral process and through the screening process to identify those students who are at risk. We're using the BASS reading assessment to find students at Tier 1, and that's happening with fidelity across the district. So we have 3 data points throughout the year that we're exploring, and then students are referred to reading specialists when they aren't making the expected progress. And then the reading specialists have this specialized training now that they can deliver services to students in the district utilizing Orton-Gillingham training and these multisensory approaches. And that's in the general education population. And so then when students don't make the expected progress at Tier 2, then they may become a referral to Tier 3. So we took we were very systematic last year in how we chose to kind of put some of these processes in place so that we could find as many students and as early on as possible. And I'm be the first to say there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm also really proud of the work that we have done. School psychologists, including myself and all the school psychologists in the district, do have the tools and the training to find these students and identify them. They're active parts of the IST process and SST teams in helping to find students and ensure that they get the services and supports that they need. And they're very committed to the work. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Let's take community comment, additional community comment. I have one additional card, Kathy Jordan.
Thank you, too. Todd's point about returns, probably this is something obvious for you all, but I wanted to bring it up, that in the LCAP meeting, the data that was given out said that only 24.6% of our students with disabilities are graduating meeting the A3G requirements, meaning 75% are not. Would that be something that could be considered a return that should be looked at? And as we know also that proficiency scores from elementary school predict whether or not these students with low proficiency scores will meet A3G requirements upon graduating from high school. So that also then tells us that obviously early identification and work and support and services are incredibly important well before even that testing takes place. And the CASP scores that I've seen for students with disabilities in Palo Alto Unified is dismal in comparison to the rest of the population. So of course there's a lot of work to be done, and great that you're looking at this, but I would hope that that would be one of the returns that everybody be looking at going forward. Thank you.
If I just follow up on Ms. Jordan's comment, the whole premise of RTI is about data collection. That's what RTI is, and that's how students move along the tiers. So the most immediate data collection is around the RTI process, and like Ms. Jordan mentioned, those large-scale outcomes we're looking for are things like graduation rates and performance on statewide assessments.
Did you have another question that you wanted to?
I did. I have a question totally with my teacher hat on, not my board hat, because when you said something, it made me go, huh. You had mentioned that one of the programs that we're using, one of the creators said, even kids who you might have thought would not ever be able to read, like if you do this with Fidelity, they'll get to read, they'll learn how to read. And I guess my thought is just, it brings me back to, we as educators, as a school district, can get into a realm where, in the interest of improving the data and all the data collection we're talking about, they're not little computers that we're just trying to program. They are people. And in elementary school, I would hope if there's one thing they accomplish in 6 years of having kids, is that they develop a love of reading and a love of learning. And I have seen reading programs that suck the life out of children, but man, they got some phonemic awareness like you can't believe. And I've seen programs that are very different. My experience, having been a teacher and a staff developer using Teachers College, was fantastic. They developed a love of literature, and they attended to craft and writing and whatnot. And I know we use a variety of different methods for both teaching reading in general and specifically trying to support students that struggle. And I'm wondering if you can just talk to me, assuage my fears that we are not abandoning love of literature for teaching them phonemic awareness without anything else.
Right, so I look at this in terms of phases, because the love of reading will not come if you can't read. So there's a certain amount of time that has to be spent on building the foundational skills. And sometimes they're not fun, but here's the great part. The new structure, the structure that we're prescribed to now, the multi-sensory structured, it involves kids actually getting up. I'm going to tell you, the last training, I sat through the whole training. Literally, there were teachers and aides working with each other where the student was drawing, air letters and doing weird dances. And I mean, it was just phenomenal. And the whole objective of that was to make sure that students not only look at words, they're feeling it, they're touching it. Some of them probably taste it too, but I mean, what's important is that they are experiencing the literature in a variety of different ways. That's going to help us first identify what types of modalities students respond to in the first place. But secondly, it's going to make sure that we keep kids engaged in the learning. And I have to tell you, teaching phonics and learning phonics can be pretty repetitive.
Well, right. Well, I
Nature
think
of the
this is my
work.
concern, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
I don't just want to be back to basics. I want us to be doing both at the same time, right? Like,
So what,
this is fun at
what
the
you
same
do
time.
with that repetition is you just make it fun. You know, and I have to, and this is, if I say nothing else before I leave here today, here's what's important. This is not about the program we use. These are about the strategies and approaches we use with any program we choose to use. So the district can have 100 different ones, and all 100 of them could be successful, or none of them can be successful if they're not provided in the right framework. So that's the key point to remember.
Thank you.
Learning your times tables is not fun. But if you don't know them, you can't do more advanced math.
Okay, but
Let me continue here. My son thought reading was horrible because he couldn't do it, and he was embarrassed. And he was embarrassed that his friends could do it, and he couldn't participate in the discussions unless he watched the movie. And it wasn't fun. The scaffolding that had to be done for him to get the just the phonics down, just the very basics. We have to do that with kids. It's not fair. It's not fair for some kids who have every capacity for participating in the classroom not to have that kind of structured scaffolding. And guess what? If we do that right, it's going to help every single kid, not just the kids that have dyslexia. So I remember sitting down with an old-time reading specialist in this district who said that she just read to her kids, and then she took them on a boat and read to them for a year on a boat, and then they could read. And I just wanted to cry because that was never going to work for my child. And so I hear what you said, but he was never going to get to the point where he could enjoy the literature if we didn't give those basic skills there. And Ms. Opak is laughing because she knows this kid, but she knows a lot of kids like this. So I just want to make sure that this multi-sensory approach and scaffolding is really, really important. And reading is the foundation for everything these kids are going to have to do in every subject. So if we don't get that right, it's going to be very hard to get anything else right. So I want to thank you for what you're doing here.
So I'm going to, I have not had a chance yet, so I'm going to go, and then if there's still burning issues, then we can bring them up, although we still have other items. So I want to go back to what Mr. Collins said, because I was really struck by the first thing he said about the sort of the largeness of the opportunity here, and the fact that, you know, as I think he said, you know, if we have something that can positively affect in a meaningful way 20% of the students in our district, you know, that's a huge opportunity, right? And so we should really take that opportunity up. We could be facing a situation in which there is no such large opportunity, and we have to kind of go after a set of smaller opportunities, much harder to do. So I think it's, you know, it's fortuitous that we were directed, you know, to this. And I think given the size of that opportunity, I think thinking about that in terms of the millions of dollars is reasonable, you know, given our budget and given the number of students we're talking about. So I guess I was impressed with the comments of speakers, and particularly a couple of questions that they asked that I really want to understand. One is, do you think that we have the right, and this comes from Ms. Heal's comments, do you think that we have the right level of program evaluation here so that we can assess, given the speed of, you know, effectiveness, can we really assess whether or not we are doing what you said needs to be done, right? Using these programs with fidelity. Presumably these all come with expectations about what you should see if you were doing it correctly. Are we seeing that?
So here's what I'll say. It is, this is not quite the tool to lend itself to a program evaluation, because the work we're talking about is not a program. The work we're talking about are best practices in the classroom. So if we're going to evaluate anything, it's going to be the outcomes of students, and it's an evaluation of whether when principals walk into classrooms, whether they see structured multisensory approaches happening in the classroom.
So I'm not going to use the right word to ask the question,
Okay.
but to answer the question, I should have asked it. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So here's what I'll say. The most important piece of this is the data piece. And I have to tell you, because if we don't understand where we're starting, the baseline with our students, it's going to be hard for us to measure whether we've made any impact at all. This is, again, what RTI and MTSS is all about. It is establishing a baseline. Even before that, it is identifying that we need to establish this baseline for students who are in need. But secondly is, here's the starting point. And we, with fidelity, implement the strategies that have been taught, and then we measure along the way, not at the end, not even at the end of the year. We're talking about incremental measurements at 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And all of those measurements are documented along the way. What we really have to spend some time doing is identifying what's an acceptable rate of progress before we get to the next level of the tier, or before we identify a student for special education services. We don't want an undue delay in identifying students for services and supports, but at the same time, we do want to give some time to understand where a student started, and at some measurable point, where the student is in the continuum, so we can make sure that we're moving them along. To Mr. Collins' point, in terms of having students in intervention for lengthy periods of time, that only happens when you're not measuring, when you're not collecting data to identify whether the student is moving, and you're not appropriately adjusting what you're doing to meet the needs of the student. So.
Well, that all makes sense to me. I'd like to see, again, given the size of the opportunity, y'all come back fairly soon to talk about the specific, so how that's going in terms of the evaluation and whether you feel comfortable. The second point comes from Ms. Engley's comment that she worries that we are not funding this work sufficiently. So I want to understand your opinion about that.
So here's the unique piece. If a student is qualified for special education, there's a ready available funding source for that. When a new initiative like this comes along, it's heavily embedded in the general education world. That means that there is no identified source of funding unless we create that. So we do have to spend some time identifying what the needs are moving forward, and what that's going to cost us, and making sure that we allot the appropriate amount of funds.
I remember the discussion that we had, I think, about this, where we talked about, the desirability of sort of getting our feet under us and starting smaller rather than larger, so that we didn't, have our resources outstrip our ability to use them wisely. Do you think we are in a good balance at this point, or do you think that the board should consider, putting some more money into this at this point?
Well, I always appreciate more money, so I'm not going to say no to that. What I will say is the work that we're doing right now in terms of building capacity does require some funding, and I have to tell you, some of the things that I'm doing right now, we're pulling from special education funds, because we know that there's primarily impact for our students with disabilities who are already in the pipeline. So I feel comfortable using some funding for that, but at the end of the day, we can't sustain using that particular funding source. So it's important for us to really set aside some funds, I think, for that particular project.
Well, I encourage staff then to bring a proposal for supplementary funding for that purpose. I think that, at least from my perspective, I think that would be a wise thing for us to consider doing. And certainly if we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, then, there's probably a better option.
I think that this may be one of the few things where you heard all of us say we want to make sure we're funding this appropriately.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Okay, well, I'll ask then, Ms. DeBranza, if you still want to engage further in the debate over. It sounds like you do.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Totally
Let's do that, and then let's move on to
I
the next
just want
step.
my board colleagues to consider, as we think about what comes when, that we certainly do not wait until after kids can read before we really work to have them develop a love of literature. We read chapter books to them in kindergarten and in first grade, and hopefully parents do before they start school. We have wordless books so the kids can read the pictures.
Absolutely.
We do not wait until they are perfect spellers before they start writing. We encourage them to start writing when they just have initial consonants, whatnot. And same thing with math in kindergarten. They're engaging in in multiplicative work before they have any idea what those multiplication facts are. So this idea of like one comes before the other is one that I think is really dangerous at our elementary schools. And I think that our educators are on board with that, but I just want to make sure that as board members, we understand that as much as it can be very frustrating to leave a student trying to read without the proper supports to do it, you don't wait and do one before you do the other, but it's really important that both happen at the same time and that we don't focus on a program that leaves one out and focuses just on the other.
Right, absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to say.
I suspect it matters more that the teachers understand that than I understand it, but.
But we're the ones that are deciding what we're funding and how we're funding it. And I want to make sure, I think the
Okay,
educators do understand that.
let's move on.
If I may
It's
just
a
add
really
one
fascinating
final
topic.
point I think is important. There's a strong need for parent education around this as well. I am currently hosting monthly special education parent forums. We will be featuring dyslexia at the next one. And we'll also be partnering with the CAC to host a second parent ed forum around dyslexia specifically. So you should see more information coming on that.
Great. Okay, I think we'll be hearing about this again in the not too distant future. Thanks for this very much.
I don't think that you did, but I think that.
Let's move on then to our information items. Item 7A, I think that's next, right? Let me look at my cheat sheet. That's the CASP participation report. Dr. Austin?
So as we continue to evolve our agenda, information items are placed here as standalones, meaning that there's no presentation. If there are no questions, it goes nowhere beyond that. Specifically, when it comes to our CASP and other student achievement results, an observation coming here is that they were wrapped into one massive high-stakes report, or a series of massive high-stakes reports. Working with research, evaluation, and assessment teams, we're trying to get away from that, break them into much smaller parts, have some sequencing to them, start big global, and then drill down over time. So as a result, what you see tonight is only the large participation rate report. In future meetings, what we plan to do is have one of these in every coming up meeting. When there are topics that require some additional explanation, we'll probably list them at the top as reports. Otherwise, we're playing with it right now, and we have it as information. Since we're still not good at predicting what's going to have questions, we have two staff members who are here to answer questions. In the future, down the road, that's exactly opposite of our goal. The goal would be to have an information item that if questions came out of it, we would answer those questions at a subsequent meeting. But for tonight, they are here if there are questions.
That's helpful. I wasn't sure the difference between the reports and the informations. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any cards on this topic. Is that right? That's right. Mr. Collins, do you have any comments or questions? Ms. Bain-Caswell?
Yeah, one thing that was briefly brought up in the last discussion by somebody, and now I don't remember who, was I know way back we had some data that showed that kids that were below proficient in the first year that they took the test, so second or third grade, I think is when they do that, historically were not being successful in completing the A through Gs. So I'd like to take a look at that again and see if we've made any progress on that. And the only way we can look at whether we've made progress is to look at it over a couple of years. And I appreciate the breakdown by subgroups, but it's not so meaningful to me unless the subgroups are broken down at different grade levels so that we can see if there's spots where we're getting stuck. And why did I care about that? I care about that because this is where we decide where to spend extra resources. And so I think that would be a good thing to take a look at.
Clarifying question. Are you talking about student achievement or in this case participation rates?
Participation rates are interesting, but not as important as the achievement, assuming we have a reasonable participation rates. Obviously, 11th grade, we don't have a reasonable participation rate, so the breakdown by group is sort of not going to be that helpful to look at. We're not going to be able to make any good decisions on that. But on the lower grades, I think we have reasonable participation rates.
Okay.
Actually, I did want to share something. So I went to professional development for the world language group and participated, which was fun. But one of the things they were talking about was the bioliteracy certificate as a way to up the participation at the 11th grade level. And so that just might be something we want to talk about too, or have a presentation from them on that later on.
Mr. Brienza?
Thank you for this information. I just had sort of one two-pronged question. I think that when we look at participation rates, there's probably two different reasons that we want high participation. I think one is we're hoping it gives us more data. And two, I'm wondering if as a basic aid district, we do get funding or risk losing funding if our participation rate isn't high enough. I think I differ from most of my board colleagues in that I'm not too concerned that we don't have a particularly high 11th grade participation rate, because I think we assess our kids a lot, and I think we hopefully have a very good sense of who we need to be concerned about and who's not at standard and who is. But I'm wondering if you could speak to, do we risk something by not getting that number up just financially? And then do you think that this paints a, how big, what impact do you think it has on painting a more robust picture of the students that we're already assessing in multiple other ways?
There are a couple pieces to that, and I'm going to ask Mr. Kohler to come to the microphone, partly because he stuck around so long. Couple things. I wouldn't worry about the financial piece as much as I would worry about a couple other places. How do we measure student achievement if we're not measuring the student achievement? Number one, you want to have robust sample sizes, including the subgroups. Number two, this year the state finally looks like landed on essentially a penalty for lack of participation rates, and that's something that had been discussed for months and months, and we finally received clarification about what that will be. So, and Mr. Kohler is going to go through that in a second. That matters or doesn't matter depending on your perspective. But this is a district that takes some pride in being ranked #1 in the state of California. And if we are artificially penalized for low participation rates, that's something that may be of interest to some people. But Mr. Kohler, why don't you address that piece?
Yes, thank you. We learned 2 weeks ago, Ms. Penny, who also stayed late, was at the Assessment Accountability County meeting. One of the things that the state is doing now is you're going to lose points on the academic indicators on the California dashboard. I'm just going to try to make it straight as possible. You know the colored pies where we take a look at the performance of all the subgroups within the district, and there are 2 academic indicators for grades 3 through 8, math and ELA, that are based upon the SBAC scores of those students. What will happen is that for the district itself, as well as the subgroups of students, they will be penalized in terms of having their actual score reduced. So and there's a formula, if you're interested in formula, it's on the front page of the memo. The gist of it is that we will be penalized 25% of the distance between the actual participation rate and the 95% goal. Okay, I saw the glazing over, 3 people. So let's say that we, instead of 95%, we hit 75%, which is 20% below the goal. We'd be penalized a quarter of that, so our academic score would be reduced by 5 points. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Now, whether or not this is as Dr. Austin said, it may or may not be a problem depending upon who is paying attention to it and why they care. But one of the things that I think we're particularly interested or worried about is some of our smaller subgroups. Because some of the students groups that may have been yellow or orange on the previous dashboard, they may be the ones who, even if they're missing at the same rate as all the rest of the groups, they might be the ones who feel it most likely. We have groups that are 70% above benchmark, or 70 points above benchmark. So penalizing them 20, 30, 40 points, we won't notice a ding on those. And so I think right now, what we tried to talk about in here was that as we move down to the levels, and I think this is related to talking about information at the grade level, the state cares about the aggregated grades 3 through 8 in terms of the academic indicator that they're going to report on the dashboard. And so that's why we put the information in using the same breakdowns as the state is going to use. We did do a separate internal run of the data and took a look at each of the subgroups at each of the schools. And we will be having, as indicated by the memo, we'll be having individual conversations with some of the principals if there were some areas where we have concern, but generally not that much of a concern.
Can you speak to 11th grade? Because that seems to be our biggest participation problem, no?
Okay, yes. 11th grade, well, I think in the earlier draft of this memo, Gunn High School's work was described as heroic.
It was.
Because a lot of people, including myself, I don't know how much faith I had, but they turned around their participation rate. And the very last page of the memo lists a set of things that Gunn did to expressly try to increase engagement of students and families in the CASP testing. It's interesting because one of the things that we tried to promote is that you need to take this test to help you get the status for the state seal of biliteracy. So that's how you demonstrate that you're proficient in English, is by using that score. And so that's one of the selling points. We were trying to look for every way possible to try to help the students understand that this would be advantageous for them to participate in. And so we learned a lot. I don't know, we're going to double down next year and do some more. I think the interesting thing that we saw, though, and I was trying to hint at this, is that while we focused very much in the last couple of years on parents opting their students out of the testing, one of the things that we're starting to see now is that the number of kids at the high school who are just not tested, which means that they weren't there and they did not come to the makeup test, that's growing almost to an equal number of kids who had a formal opting out from the parents. So it comes back around to something that we've talked about before, which is what is the culture of doing this test in this community, that's around it. And I think that that's, while we see some of the messaging here that worked at Gunn, I think now we're entering that second tier of challenge in terms of it's not the parents that we have to convince to not opt out, but we also have to look in general at why people don't think it's important to take it all.
Can I just say something? Because I said it last year.
Yes.
You look at other districts around us, our neighboring districts, there are some consequences of not coming to the test. And if this is important to us, we need to have consequences just like they do. We could just copy what they're doing in Mountain View, Los Altos.
In fact, I think after the first year, and Janine, you might help me with this, we did make sure that it was a required attendance day.
We are so much nicer than the districts around us on that.
Yes.
I like being nice, but if this is our goal, then maybe we need to be a little stricter.
Yes.
Ms. Godfrey?
I think Ms. Ofek has a comment.
Oh, sorry.
She's got that look.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that we talked about culture earlier. I think there would be a huge cultural shift because some of our neighboring districts link it to college recommendations. When I did some phone calling last year, and if you don't participate in the assessment, then you don't get letter of recommendation. And I think that would, I don't know how that would be received by our community.
Can I make sure that doesn't end up anywhere? The board is not considering it. That is not our recommendation. That is somebody else.
Well, I appreciate I appreciate the suggestion, and I
Well,
think
I'm
we
not
should look
making
at
it a
all.
suggestion. I'm saying what others do.
I think we should look at all options in order to achieve what we agree is an important goal.
We'd be more than happy to bring back what surrounding districts are doing. I just don't want even a hint that that is a recommendation.
It is not.
For us, and it wasn't taken that way. I want to be cautious on that one.
So shout out to Gunn. That's great. I think we had talked about some of these things last year, and it's glad to see that that can help. I also thought that we had discussed last year that we couldn't actually penalize students for it. I thought that was part of the guidelines because it is optional. So I would like to understand that better, like what we can and can't do. So in the context of finding out what other people are doing, when we find out what they're doing, I'd like to know if it's actually legal before we adopt it. The other thing that I read in here, and then when you said it and reiterated it, it shocked me again, because when I read it the first time, I was thinking, I don't think I understand this. So the state is proposing reporting numbers that aren't accurate in order to penalize districts for not having the appropriate level of participation. Is that what this says?
Yes.
One way to put it would be that the state is adjusting the accurate measure to what they consider it to represent in terms of students who would have not participated. There's a lot of negatives in that sentence.
Yeah, so their guess is that the kids who didn't participate would have scored 0, so they're,
Well,
help me out.
I think nobody knows how the students who did not participate would have tested. But if you think about areas that are not Palo Alto, it may be that certain subgroups of students are I'm thinking Chicago now. There may be students who are encouraged not to attend and not to test.
So not to bring down the score.
Not to bring down the scores. And so, you know, I think I can see some of the logic behind what the state, what CDE is doing with this, although it doesn't necessarily apply to our situation.
yeah, wouldn't they rather report the score than then give some sort of reliability factor to it, or statistically significant or not? Like, I just can't imagine we would make a decision to report the wrong number on purpose.
Just to comment, this is actually pretty common across states, because most states just assign a failing score of 0 to every student who does not take it. So it automatically brings the averages down in terms of the pass rates, so.
Including tests that kids can opt out of?
If you don't, exactly, if you don't show, because that's a difference between the state requirement and the federal requirement.
They don't understand the difference between null and 0?
So to clarify the opt-out, this test is not optional, so we are mandated to test all of our students, grade 3 through 8 and 11. In Ed Code, parents may opt their child out, but students can't opt their child out. So the test isn't optional. So that's one piece. Another piece to clarify about the student score, no matter what, students receive a score. If they don't test, they don't get a score. So when we're talking about the distance from standard subtraction, that's from the aggregate that that the state is reporting out on, but it's not impacting any individual student score or school level. Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah. They're actually nicer here in California than other states.
It still seems crazy. Like,
Well,
how do you know which districts you should go try to fix if the data's
One thing that just kind of popped into my head is that this is not going to change the scores that are reported on the CAF's website. Those are still going to be the straight numbers. This adjustment is made on the dashboard when they try to look at the achievement and the change variables that are used in the 5x5 tables. So that's when it comes into play, but not in the actual, the CAS website that just gives you the numbers.
So that's even better. So we're going to report different things on different websites about the same thing.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Awesome.
Is there more on?
I'm out.
Can I just say?
So this
Ms.
may or may not
let me-
help, but
$19.51.
so the CASP results site is
Yeah, let's
just.
see if we can, I just want to focus on the issues that we can control here.
We can control this issue. I mean, we can have input on this issue,
That's
right?
true.
If we think it's truly bad policy, we should speak up.
Is, student board members, Ms. Furrier?
The biggest thing I kind of thought about when this was presented to us yesterday with Dr. Austin is that there's really no incentive for students to take tests. And I know like we want to have like a punishment for it in a sense, not a punishment, but like something to enforce it, but there's no incentives. And frankly, during the week of the testing, teachers don't really make a workload any lighter. And it's kind of just another added thing onto the student's plate. I think instead of just educating the administrators to, oh, change the culture, I think you have to really sit down and talk to the teachers about like, if you really want students to take this test, how they're going to change their whole week. Because kids don't want to have to take a whole other standardized testing in their junior year with like a whole plate of work on their like hands already. Even tying it into their academic life a little bit. I don't know if it's allowed, but like maybe having extra credit or something for your classes, because there's no incentive really right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of the effective changes at Gun last year were based on the incentives that Caroline was talking about. So we added stuff like a barbecue that was offered to students who took it, raffles that kids really liked. I think one of the most effective ways, it wasn't necessarily what the official policy was, but like what ended up happening was teachers talking to students in their classes about why the test was good to take, why it was helping the community. And students generally respected their teachers a lot and like had close interaction with them, so they're more likely to listen to teachers when they are the ones who told them, look, you should take this test, it's a good thing to do. And I think the seal of biliteracy was communicated well to students, and that was something that like a lot of students wanted to get because it looked cool and stuff. In terms of what can be done in the future, I agree with Caroline. If there's any way to reduce workload the week of the CASP test, that'd be a primary reason that would like motivate even more students to take it, because I know a lot of my friends who opted out did so because they either had a test that week, projects, other stuff they needed to work on. And I agree that we should continue in the path of incentive instead of punishment. I think if we had students begrudgingly take this test, it wouldn't go down so well, and like students get mad. So yeah, I think more incentives and like maybe integrating more academic components into the incentive structure would help.
Interesting. I would say a couple things. First, I appreciate the format here, and I also appreciate, I think we've had more information and fewer PowerPoint slides at this meeting than at any point in history, so thank you for that. It's really great, actually, to be getting these more, sort of discursive memos rather than PowerPoint slides. I think they survive the meeting. I think the members of the community will find them more useful if they weren't able to attend or watch than they would a slide presentation. So I think that's great. Thank you for that. I think it's important that we increase participation. I think this is, the state legislature and taxpayers of this community have a right to expect that we're going to adhere to and participate in the accountability metrics. I also think it's really important for us to be able to compare ourselves to other districts, because I think that sometimes we forget to do that and we miss an opportunity to look for places where we could be doing better as compared to other districts, and we're not going to know that if we don't have those comparability metrics. So I think it's really important to do that. I appreciate the work that you're doing there. Is there more on this topic? Anybody? No?
Yeah, I just want to share one thing, and that is AB 1951 is still on the governor's desk. And, oh, was it signed? Oh, it was vetoed. Oh, so it's not on the governor's desk anymore. Thank you for the
It's in his
update.
trash can.
Well, I think that's unfortunate because taking the SAT or ACT, we know that our students want to take that test, and it's too bad that that's not going to be mandated now.
I have one, I think, a question. So our participation rate overall was, what, about 50? Something like that, 40?
Yeah, the high
The
schools
11th
are-
grade, sorry, yeah. Do you have any idea how many high schools or how many districts in the state of California have a lower participation rate than we do?
No, we have not looked into that.
Say again?
No, we haven't looked into that.
Okay. Why are you laughing, Dr. Archie?
I'm laughing because I've been at the
Oh, you-
worst two in the state of California now.
Yeah.
So I promise it's not me.
My belief is that we are, if not the lowest, among the lowest. Do you have any idea how many high schools are able to get over the 95% participation percent target for? You don't?
No, we haven't looked into that.
Okay. My understanding is almost all of them. Without special incentives, without, without a lot of coaxing and encouragement, it's an expected part of what students do and what teachers are asking students to do. And I really hope that we can get there, because every other kid, the vast majority of other kids in the state of California take this test. They do their civic duty to help us manage our education system the best way we can. And I hope we can do the same in Palo Alto. So thank you for your good work, and I hope you even better luck next year.
No, in a low-stakes test like this, low stakes for the students as they see it, it does become a reflection on the degree to which we have produced a good person who understands it as part of their payback for the district. And I want to be clear and on the record, we are not considering any penalties right now, so please, no newspaper articles about that. That could be taken the wrong way, but no. But thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that item. Let us move to
thank you.
Board operations, which is our last item. Ms. Godfrey.
I just want to reflect back on the students who's talked about the dress code, and I'd like to get that into our queue of things to discuss. It's been an issue for years and years, and it really now sticks out like a sore thumb, because it is so much about what girls wear and distracting boys. So we need to get on that. That's it.
So are you, my sense was, listening to the superintendent, that he intends to, sort of to give staff direction on this. Do you think this requires a board discussion, or can you give some more guidance about what you're looking for? Because it sounds like.
So what I'm sharing is that if it's a board decision to be made, I'd like to change them. I understand that Dr. Austin probably doesn't know what they are yet, and we'll go check it out. It may be obvious what needs to be done. There may be no pushback from the middle schools at all, and it could be like an administrative regulation that we don't have to approve. I really think it depends on how it works out when Dr. Austin goes to check it out. So I'm just making my feelings known so that there won't be any surprise later.
Got it. Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Godfrey? Mr. Collins? Ms. Baton-Caswell?
Yeah, I thought the 100-year anniversary celebration was really fun, and thank you, Ms. Hendricks, for being there. I'm hoping we're going to do something for the 125th anniversary. I know that we don't have any plans right now, but it seems like we seem to miss sometimes these opportunities to celebrate, and yet we get upset when things aren't going well. So I think we have to balance it a little bit better, and so I hope that we can talk about that. I thought the PD Day was very good. I mean, people seem very engaged and energized walking around Palo Alto High School, where a lot of the secondary, or maybe all the secondaries, stuff was going on. Seemed really, really good. Schools for Sound Finance is having their fall regional meetings, the one that we normally go to tomorrow, and I believe you're going to the one tomorrow. So hopefully we'll get an update on Friday about what that group is doing. I'm going to Cal SSD on Thursday. I will share what they bring forward. Hope to see you at the October 17th fall dinner, and the one that the Santa Clara County School Boards Association is holding, and I hope we'll see some staff there as well. I hope that if you have the time that you will participate in the float judging at Pally and the rally at Gunn for Spirit Week.
Could we have the dates for those again, actually? That was,
Yeah, we got emails in our inbox about them from the, okay.
Oh, wait, I can, might be
The reason, this may seem like, oh, well, I don't have time to go or whatever. It's really fun to go. It's really important for us to go to some of these rah-rah activities. So I hope to see you all there.
I didn't see an inbox. I saw something for Pally. I didn't see it for Gun.
Yeah, that came in last week.
Oh, boy. I'll have to go back and look.
It came from Ms. Hall,
From Ms. Hall.
Mrs. Hall.
It's a lot of power to be a judge, too, so, you know.
Oh, yeah. Make sure you judge right.
I was sorry to miss the celebration on Sunday. I was out of town and was bummed to miss it. But I, Ms. Godfrey, know that I have already added school dress code policy to our agenda setting list for tomorrow because I was not aware of them, and I share your concerns. So I look forward to discussing it in agenda setting to figure out where it fits and where it should go. That's it.
Yeah, I agree on the dress code, and I hope that actually that our student board reps carry back the message that when students come and they have a complaint about how we're doing something, that we take it seriously and that that it does make an impact. So I think that's a good lesson for that. This is certainly something that I think we should take up, or that staff should take up, and maybe the board. I don't have anything else. I was sorry to miss the centennial. I was out of town yesterday. It sounds like a great, I would love to have been there. It sounds like a lot of fun. I'm sure that the folks at Channing House too really enjoyed seeing all the students there.
It was really fun to start it out. The guy I was standing next to told me his mother had marched in the
Oh my gosh.
in the 1918 march that had 300 people marching.
Wow.
That's intense.
Okay, is there any student board members? Do you have anything for board operations?
Yeah, just really quickly, I forgot the 23rd is a Tuesday, so I meant the 25th.
Okay.
Thursday.
You should come to Pally's, which is the day after on that Friday, the 28th?
Friday's the 26th.
26th. Oh, gosh, yeah. But
So
Pally's
Gun is the
better.
25th, which is a Thursday.
I believe is the 25th.
You
Okay.
can do both, maybe?
You can do both.
Yeah, I hope that members of the community are listening and that they'll
And
do both.
Pally has like their rival team for their football game that night, Los Gatos. So that will be an interesting game if you want to go to that too.
I have a quick question. We had a community request for something on the agenda. Is agenda setting considering that?
This is the world languages request. I sent a note back to her about her request, and I haven't heard back from her. I'm going to ask her again to follow up because I wanted to have some more. I wanted to give her some information about it and have an opportunity to hear about what exactly she was looking for and to set her expectations. So I did see it. I am in communication with her.
Thank you.
Yep.
I emailed back and forth with her as well, and I think it is.
Okay.
I have one question
yes.
about the robotics team. Is there like any immediate action that gets done on that? Like, how does that work if they come to the board about it and they've already been to administration? Like, who deals with that next? And like, what's the follow-up on that?
Dr. Austin, I think that's one for you.
Yeah, I think the important piece there's a lot of action going on right now. There are people at every level that have been working on this. So, even today there was action. Yesterday there was action. Last Friday there was action. It's in at least 2 different offices here at the district office, actually 3 different offices here. The principal, the assistant principal, the advisor. So there's quite a bit.
So maybe a sidebar conversation.
Yeah, I just think it's important to note this is getting action.
Is there anything else? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.